Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed on AACPS's YouTube channel. General information protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the doorway as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already. And now for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies. Being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Now for the pledge.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve is printed.
Second. Madam President. Oh, sorry. Never mind.
Okay, I have a motion to approve in a second. Do I have consensus to approve the minutes? All right. Patience, Dr. Tobin. Item 2.04. Item 2.04. This is establish agenda order. Before we get started on this agenda item, approving the agenda, I do want to just give a little logistical note. So Dr. Tasha Prieto of Prismatic Services must join us virtually tonight to deliver her final report on school start and dismissal times. That means when we get to item 5.01 on the agenda, and I anticipate that the board will perhaps move to that item to the end of the agenda so that we can address other items quickly and then turn our attention to that item. We will bring Dr. Prieto into the meeting via Zoom. The board will need to put on headphones and converse with Dr. Prieto, and that means there will be no audio through the speakers here in the boardroom. There is a television in the lobby that will have audio and video, so you can certainly watch the discussion about that item here. While I don't anticipate other items taking very long, you may also, if you wish, choose to travel home or some other venue to view the discussion at that time. So except for a short break to begin the Zoom portion of the meeting, the broadcast on AACPS TV and AACPS's YouTube channel should be uninterrupted. So I hope that makes sense to everyone just for that one agenda item. And now, Dr. Tobin.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we take item 5.01 on tonight's agenda out of order and hear it after item 9.02 this evening.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Howell?
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Ms. Frank? Aye. Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Omasore?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Any other discussion of the agenda?
Motion to approve agenda as amended.
Second.
Ms. Howell?
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Ms. Frank? Aye. Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Omasore?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Next, we have item 2.05, recognitions. We do have a recognition this evening. There was some very exciting news about one of our schools and the recognition that it got this week in the, U.S. News. And so I'm going to pass this over to Ms. Schulheim to present.
Thank you. So this is a quote from U.S. News and World Report. The U.S. News and World Report K-12 Director encompasses 102,610 preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools that you can search based on the state, district, or city near you. The data on student diversity, teachers, counselors, test scores, and district spending can help families find the right school for their child. Shipley's Choice Elementary was recently named the #1 Maryland elementary school and the #1 elementary school in Anne Arundel County by the U.S. News and World Report. Shipley's Choice Elementary School was founded in 1988 and is nestled in the Shipley's Choice community located in Millersville along a tributary to the Chesapeake Bay. The community was originally settled in 1681 by Adam Shipley, the land chosen for its beauty and resources. Shipley's descendants include Abraham Lincoln, as well as a current student at the school. Today, there are tree-lined roads and meandering wooded paths that link the Shipley's Choice neighborhood to the school, allowing the majority of the 390 students to walk or bike to school. The vision of Shipley's Choice is to create a nurturing, collaborative learning community that engages and inspires students to persevere and achieve. Shipley's Choice Elementary is the proud recipient of the Maryland Blue Ribbon in 1995 and again in 2016. The school was awarded National Blue Ribbon in 2017. The National Blue Ribbon Schools Program is a United States government program created in 1982 to honor schools which have achieved high levels of performance or made significant improvements in closing the achievement gap among student subgroups. Shipley's Choice Elementary School students are unique learners and represent a range of learning differences that are cultivated by a skilled and caring staff. As a result, the school's reputation is one of the major reasons that many families move into the community. With us this evening is Shipley's Choice Elementary School Principal, Dr. Beth Burke, Regional Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Janine Robinson, and a few guests who Dr. Burke can introduce. Dr. Burke, we welcome you to the podium for brief remarks, and then we will take a few photos to capture this momentous occasion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Schallheim, for those kind words, and thank you, board members, Dr. Arlotto. I'm really just humbled and excited to be here, and I'm so glad to hear that our school is being recognized for the excellence that I see every day. It's a really, truly amazing community, very supportive families who are always there, ready to just dig in and give us their time or anything else that we need. We have amazing students who show curiosity and grit and growth mindset every day. And the most important factor, our teachers. We have amazing instructors who are deeply dedicated, love their students, and work hard. And I've never seen such an amazing group of teachers. I brought just a couple. I wanted to bring everyone today, but I brought just a couple with me to represent. We have Shelby Queen, who was there when the school first opened in 1988.
Oh, wow.
Amy Nelson is a lead teacher in 3rd grade. And Phil Lutchen is a lead teacher in 4th grade. So thank you. Soon to be an administrator too, I'm just saying. So thank you, Ms. Robinson, for all your support, and thank you all. I'm really honored to be a part of this wonderful community. Thanks.
Board members and Dr. Love, if you'd like to stand and come together.
Oh, yeah.
You guys can kind of. Just to take a little mini step in the opposite direction. Everybody just kind of a little bit. There we go. 3. All right, everyone. Just keep looking this way. We'll take photos. Let everybody else get some that needs to get some.
Let's do some. This one.
Anyone else?
Ah, that was nice.
How exciting.
Yes.
Next, item 3.01, President's update. I don't really have an update, but we have some dates coming up that I just want to share, because a lot of times we do this at the end of the meeting and no one gets to hear. So our next general board meeting will be Wednesday, November 3rd at noon. Our policy committee will be meeting Tuesday, November 2nd at 3 p.m. Our equity committee will be meeting Tuesday, November 9th at 11:30 a.m. And those meetings are virtual. The budget committee will be meeting Tuesday, November 16th at 3 p.m., also virtual. And then on Monday, November 15th, the board will be holding a workshop, and following that will be at 6:30 p.m. where the board will hold a public hearing. And that will be on topics of the public's interest to testify. And next we have item 3.02, the Equity Committee Report. Ms. Omasori?
Thank you, President Ellis. So in our last equity meeting, we basically finished off some tabled items. So we began to consider ways to honor Mrs. Antwine, who passed in July. And we're mainly focusing on connecting to the military community. So giving military students who obviously have a very, very different experience when it comes to high school, middle school, etc., opportunities to help them when it comes to their academics and socializing with the rest of the community. We also started making lists of people to contact who already have more expertise, I guess you could say, in that area, and other communities and organizations that already work to connect with the military community in Anne Arundel County. We also discussed critical race theory and other similar topics, and where basically our school system's place is in that, considering that we don't teach it and it is a graduate level course, but there's a lot of grievances across the community related to that topic. So that's something that we discussed and that we are continuing discussing in our future meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Omasori. And next we have the Budget Committee Report. Ms. Schallheim?
Yes, the budget committee met yesterday and we spoke, amongst other things, we got an ESSER 3 funding update. We talked about the FY23 board office budget, our upcoming budget binder format, super fun, and the time of the next meeting. I know you announced it might well change due to accommodate members and staff's schedules. So that is TBD, and we'll get that settled as soon as possible, and then we'll release that as we do through our normal channels.
Great, thank you for letting us know that.
Yep.
And item 3.04, Candace Antwine ROTC Scholarship Committee Report, I believe also Ms. Schallheim.
Yes, thank you. So by way of background, Ms. Candace Antwine was, as you all know, my colleague and a dear friend. She passed unexpectedly in July, and then the meeting immediately following that, we approved unanimously a lasting way to remember her would be to establish and also name a scholarship after her. And we thought it would be fitting for that scholarship to be for a student in Anne Arundel County Public Schools that once has been accepted to attend an ROTC program, a scholarship to go towards funding that endeavor. Of course, that means a commitment to serving our country, which we all strongly believe in. So the scholarship committee was established. It is myself, Dr. Tobin, and Ms. Dent, and we have worked on a loose outline of where this is headed. And so I just want to sort of walk through for members for your benefit what we've come up with. So we were thinking of basing the scholarship application very loosely after the national ROTC scholarship application. And so that includes, various components, including some essay questions, obviously personal information, the college that they're interested in going to, and then we're adding to that an interview as well, and also like listing of extracurricular activities and potential letters of recommendation. And this is just all, you know, in its ideas form right now. And so, you know, for consensus, hopefully with the entire board, we'll move forward with that. And the essay questions were going to be mirrored exactly after the National ROTC Scholarship Program. Part of the review process would include a review panel, and we would work with Dr. Arlotto to figure out who might, from his staff, would be good to include on that panel. I imagine it would include a member of this board, and so we would work together on finalizing those persons. The endowment, you know, because nothing's free and we want this to benefit a student, we can work out the details of that. Some ideas for how we can endow that could include fundraising activities, either as a board or individually. And the 21st Century Foundation has agreed to sort of hold that money, manage it for us. And so they would, like they do for a lot of their other fundraising activities, there would be a page on the 21st Century Foundation, and people could go and donate from the public if they chose to do so. And that's where we would, and through our any number of fundraising activities, direct folks there to make contributions to endow the award. Obviously, we can't draw that money out of our operating budget. It's something that we're going to have to build to then be able to award to a student. I imagine for the scholarship to be useful and hefty, it would probably need to be somewhere around a $2,000 to $3,000 scholarship. And then we can talk about the pros and cons of it being a singular year scholarship or a multi-year scholarship. You know, a lot of times ROTC students find other ways to support their education in their third and fourth year. Those opportunities are significantly less in their first and second year. And so a benefit of making it a multi-year endeavor is that it could help carry a student through to when they would have other opportunities. And it would be, obviously, after their first year successfully completing, they would have to show that they're still enrolled in their ROTC program, and might be a wonderful way for them to come via Zoom perhaps and address us, or through a recorded message. It could be a lovely way to carry it on and not just have it end abruptly after the first year. We also thought that the uses for this scholarship should be anything that is directly related to the successful attendance and completion of the first year or their second year of ROTC. So it could be used for transportation, room and board, uniforms, textbooks, school supplies. You know, all of those things are important, and a lot of times other scholarships don't cover that kind of thing. So that's how we thought the uses would go. In terms of communications, obviously we would work to leverage our fantastic communications team and various channels. We would send this out to all school counselors. We would make sure that all of our current junior ROTC instructors have that information. But since it would be open to any student in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, that we would want to make sure that the message gets out far and wide. I anticipate that if we move forward, as we've agreed unanimously that we would have the application open sometime after the new year, and that the review panel meet sometime in March or April for an award or a recommendation to the board for then an award in May is the timeline I was thinking. And so, you know, unless folks have huge issues with anything I've said, I think we continue to move forward and work out the details and hopefully have our first award of the Candace C.W. Antwine Memorial Scholarship, ROTC Scholarship in May after we finalize some details. So yeah, just looking
Great.
for your consensus, basically. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, so yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you for that update.
Thanks for indulging me, y'all.
Yeah. And on behalf of this board, certainly myself personally, we all felt a deep loss, and I appreciate the work that you are doing to carry that on. Thank you. Next, we have the item 3.05 CRASC report. Mr. Fletcher, report. I love that tie.
Thank you. I confess it is my father's, so
Tell your father he has good taste.
Dr. Alato's got a good tie on there too, I've noticed. All right. Well, good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schallheim, members of the board, and Dr. Alato. My name is Fletcher Port. I'm a senior at Severna Park High School. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm proud to serve as the CRASC Secretary of Education. I want to start by saying Happy Unity Day. The orange all across the county today looks great, and we as CRASC are proud to be in a county that brings equity to the spotlight. CRASC's executive team appointed Subashi Pradhan, a sophomore from North County High School, to fill the recently vacant position as legislative liaison. We're excited for her to join the team. Since our last CRASC report, CRASC received a special delivery from overseas. Air Force Captain Adrian Heist Herrera, a 2003 Glen Burnie High School and CRASC alum, sent us a flag that was flown in his F-15E Strike Eagle on September 19th as a thank you. Included was a note from Captain Herrera sharing the impact that CRASC had in his undergraduate and graduate education. We extend our sincerest thank you to Captain Herrera and hope to have him join us at a future CRASC meeting. On October 12th, CRASC's own parliamentarian Brenton Mead was recognized by the AACPS Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement and the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County as this month's recipient of the Caucus of African American Leaders Student Recognition Award. We're so proud of Brenton and could not think of a more deserving recipient. The first meeting of the district-wide Gender and Sexuality Alliance meeting, or GSA for short, will take place tomorrow at 6 p.m. Students looking to attend can scan the QR code on the Let's Talk Justice website to be entered into the Brightspace classroom and gain access to the meeting link. On Saturday, November 20th, Mara Bab, Minuet Hoyt, Tara Kim, and Arusa Malik, and CRASC alum Connor Kern will present at the Maryland Association of Student Council's Fall Leadership Conference. Participating in this conference helps students improve their leadership skills while meeting student leaders from across the state. We encourage eligible and interested students to reach out to their SGA advisor to register to attend. At previous board meetings, public comments have expressed frustration with what have some considered to be a terrible reopening. CRASC decided that as the countywide student government, we would take the initiative to collect photos to capture in-person student life over these past 6 weeks. These photos, as seen in the presentation on display throughout my report, come from across the district, moments that our students were dreaming of just a couple months ago, moments that our board have been working to bring back to students for the past 18 months. CRASC acknowledges that while some areas can improve, we feel that these images illustrate how happy students are to be back in an in-person environment. We would like to thank all of those who have been a part of this tireless process to get our students back in classrooms, cafeterias, sports fields, etc. For a schedule of CRASC and Let's Talk Justice events, go to their respective websites. Thank you for allowing me to give you an update about what's been happening in CRASC.
Thank you, Mr. Port, and thank you. I loved the slideshow celebrating the spirit of our students, and I too share your gratitude for every single person involved in making that possible and getting our students back to school.
Thank you all.
Next, the CAC report. Ms. Tanisha Howard.
Good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schallheim, fellow board members, and Dr. Alato. My name is Tanisha Howard, Chair of the Citizen Advisory Committee, and on behalf of the CAC body, I am pleased to update the board on our activities. The CAC will conduct our meetings virtually on the second Monday of each month from 6:45 to 8:45 p.m. Our schedule is posted on the AACPS CAC webpage located under the board tab. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is November 8th. The CAC held its regular meeting virtually Monday, October 11th, We are pleased to report this month Perspectives and Impact highlighted the coordination opportunities our military CAC representative will undertake with our cluster members, continuing the outreach and information share of military concerns and updates. Next month for this segment, we will have a guest speaker from the Fleet and Family Service Center, whose mission is to support individual and family readiness. Having knowledge and understanding of various programs and resources, our members' awareness only strengthens our ability to serve and engage whole community impact. Additionally, CAC subcommittees have undertaken the necessary work efforts, and I am pleased to update the board on board policy areas. As a reminder, these particular committees, all completed reports are submitted to the board policy committee. Emergency plans, pandemic response. The team is finalizing the reports, highlighting 5 key perspectives: risk mitigation, social and emotional well-being, accountability, transparency, and school-specific implementations. The team will transmit their final report later this month. Food allergies. We conducted a whole group work session considering the CDC's 5 priority areas: the daily management of food allergies in individual children, preparation of food allergy emergencies, professional development on food allergies for staff members, education of children and family members about food allergies, creation and maintenance of healthy and safe educational environments. Our focused research policies within and outside Maryland define food allergy scope and issues inherent in management and accommodations, impacts on Healthy Start and other disadvantaged demographics, and outline coordination efforts for delivery in person, via vending options, and virtual. Naming of school facilities. This subcommittee was established and will have its initial huddle next week. Redistricting and attendance areas. The team is finalizing the report and will transmit their updated report later this month. Student attire and personal appearance. The team is continuing work on the topic. Wellness lens. The team has completed their final report and it will be submitted this week. Special advisory areas. Hate and bias. The team will be conducting their initial kickoff meeting later this month. Ready to read and early literacy. An initial huddle was held during our regular work session, and parameters were discussed in initial research inquiry areas surrounding developing and using early literacy learning standards, early literacy focus of effective curriculum, accountability and assessment, teacher education and professional development, home-school connections. Student recess work group establish its membership and will coordinate their initial kickoff meeting in November. We received the nominations for the AACC PTA and Wellness Council, completing all CAC CPS liaison committees membership assignments. Ms. Dent, you were seated a day after our acknowledgement to the board of your appointment last month. We wanted to take this time in person to reiterate we are thrilled to have the opportunity to work with you and your vast experience with our military and veteran community, which aligns with our perspectives and impact initiative. So welcome. Sorry. As always, CAC is a proud partner at the table with the board and AACPS, supporting innovative and proactive leadership. We look forward to the work ahead, knowing our group is poised for success with its talented, professional, passionate, and dedicated members. Thank you for your support of the CAC and looking forward to our continued work strengthening the CAC overall and supporting future assistance to the board in its goals and meeting the challenges at hand and into the future. As always, we welcome your feedback and we look forward to a year with purpose, direction, and results. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. And now always, as always, thank you to all of the members of the CAC for your contributions, very important contributions. Next, we have item 3.07, the superintendent's report, school operations update. Dr. Alato.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have several updates in several different areas that I'd like to share with you this evening. First, fall academic testing is coming to a conclusion this week. We have administered over 100,000 tests over a roughly 2-week period. As a reminder, state mandated academic testing was postponed last school year and moved forward to this fall. This was unique and challenging as academic testing typically takes place in the spring of each school year. Our schools assess students in grades 4 through 12 in the MCAP for ELA and math, as well as the MISA science assessment. The assessments were administered online. Since school began on September 8th, there were 3,656 unique participants in 159 sections of AACPS professional development classes. Staff from all personnel units participate in professional development opportunities and are represented in those total numbers. We have executed a contract with a state and local health department approved COVID testing vendor who will be responsible for and coordinate the surveillance testing of students, the testing of staff, again, COVID testing, not academic testing, COVID testing of staff who are not yet vaccinated, and the testing of student athletes who are not yet vaccinated. When those programs are operational, I will bring more updates and specific information to the board. Currently, from our dashboard, we have 154 active student cases of COVID and 26 active cases of COVID for staff. There are 1,433 students isolated or quarantined and 47 staff members. As you can see from the dashboard, the numbers are fluid as COVID cases rise and fall. Regarding some trend data as it relates to our students, the number of students quarantining is down 268 since October 1st, and the number of active student cases is down 82 since October 1st. That is good news. Our transportation issues continue. As I have shared previously, we appear to be taking positive steps forward in the effort to hire the needed bus drivers so as to resolve the uncovered routes. Unfortunately, we have drivers that are having to quarantine and there are no substitute drivers available, which means the numbers of uncovered routes ebbs and flows on a daily basis. We were able to take advantage of the MVA's new Saturday testing program for school bus drivers this past Saturday, as we had 11 candidates test. 5 of those candidates passed the test and are being deployed this week. Those that did not pass will participate in reteaching and practicing and will have the opportunity to retest. Our partners of the Anne Arundel County Office of Workforce Development in this vein are partnering with us to host a job fair for not only bus drivers, but others, including food nutrition services and custodians. As I've said in the past, our efforts now focus on keeping schools open for the entire school year. While we all want to return to normal and put the pandemic completely behind us, we are not yet in a place to do so. For the health and safety of our students and staff, and our focus on keeping our schools open for the entire school year, we must continue to be vigilant. We must also make decisions with those priorities in mind. We will continue our collaborative work with the Department of Health. As public health advice and guidance changes, so too will our processes and protocols. Our students, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and staff are simply amazing, and they are thrilled. We are thrilled that we have returned to in-person learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alato. Dr. Tobin?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Alato, for that update. Lots of good news there. I wanted to ask about some of the protocols around quarantine and the information that is given to a student and a family when they're notified that they are going to be quarantined? Dr. McMahon has spoken to us previously on all the work that goes on with the academics, but I'm also interested in, all the other information. So obviously, a lot of our students depend on school for food. What is the information that's passed to parents once a student is quarantined and not able to come into school? How is the food situation handled?
Those students that are either in the virtual academy, that are full-time in the virtual academy, or those students that are quarantined can still access meals. So they they are able to call the Office of Food and Nutrition Services, who will establish with that parent a pickup location. And what I mean by that is it doesn't have to be the student's home school. Whatever school is closest to that student, to their home, or where they are quarantining, they can have a meal left for them, waiting for them, and they can a parent can stop by and pick that meal up at the school for the student. That is information that is up on the Food and Nutrition Service site with the contact number. We are also going to be including that information in the quarantine letter. It has not up to this point, but we're going to add that to the quarantine letter with that contact information should the parent want to take advantage of the meal, the daily meal.
Excellent. Thank you. And so as of essentially now, that will be included in the quarantine letter.
Yeah, I don't know. So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Mosier's giving me the nod. Yes.
Okay.
I know it was in the works.
Right.
I
Okay.
had about an hour-long conversation with Miss Reese from Food and Nutrition
Right.
Services today.
Great.
And so they have been able to supply some meals to already up to this point, but then we'll include it as an additional way of outreach.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Corkadell?
Yes, thank you very much for the update. Two quick questions. The first one was in this morning's newspaper when they were going over, it says officials turning their vaccination focus to children. Towards the end of the article, I was a little surprised to see, because and apologies if I didn't hear it in the past, that Dr. Kalyanaraman has identified and has been approved for 20 schools to be vaccination sites. Could you go into the details on that planning?
Yes, ma'am. We've been planning for many months, waiting for the 5-year-old to 11-year-old vaccine to be approved and released. So we've been working behind the scenes with the Department of Health to get ready for that whenever it can be released so that we are not behind.
Correct.
And so as soon as it gets released, we'll begin to work. We've identified schools throughout the county that we'll be able to that we'll work with the Department of Health to set up clinics. We won't be able to do that until they have the personnel that can deliver the vaccine and that they have the right number of doses. But once that part is good to go, then we've identified schools that will allow that students will be able to go to, their parents could take them to get vaccinated.
President Ellis, could the board receive maybe a list of available as soon as that the schools have been identified? A list of that available for the board?
But be glad to. As soon as that work is done, I'll be glad to share that with the board. Absolutely.
Great. And then my second question is, so some of our students who are getting alternative transportation until till we stabilize the unavailable route. Could you go over a little bit on how we're handling the breakfast service for those students? Because some are waiting in the carpool line for 30, 45 minutes and even arriving at past bell time in some instances to their first period. And the choice of eating versus missing in a year of learning loss. I was wondering how, if maybe Dr. McMahon or yourself could explain
how that is handling and how a parent could interface to if they have a concern as a follow-up to address that.
Thank you for the question. So I don't have an immediate answer. I think it's a little different at each of the schools. Certainly, we've got lots of teachers that are managing breakfast in the classroom for the students, or students are getting to the cafeteria. We've got students that are arriving late, so it's a great question. But I can't answer. I don't think that it's standard at every school and how they're going to work with each student that is coming in late. Mrs. Jackson, do you have any information to share?
Good evening. For the record, Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent for Student and School Support. That's a great question, Ms. Corcadell. As I want to reiterate what Dr. Arlotto said, it's different at each school because the procedure for breakfast is different. Some are delivered to the classroom, some are going to the line. And so there are lines for commuters that are a little bit long this year. And so the best recommendation that I would have is that if there is an issue, to please bring that to the attention of the school principal, and they can work with that child. We don't want any child to go hungry. That has been our practice, not just for this school year, but that's happened, as long as I've been a principal. For example, there have been students who come to school, they've missed breakfast, they've missed lunch, and we've always tried to find a way to provide for students. Thank you.
Just one quick follow-up, if I could. So our breakfast program this year is available to all. And that is not always the case. So very, very good blessing there that USDA was able to provide that extension for COVID. Have the individual schools communicated their version of how that would work to those students affected by the bus routing issues so that they kind of know, or is it on a they have to ask basis?
So speaking from my experience as a building principal, what I can tell you about that process and any process is that the principal finds their own unique way of communicating that process or any other process to the school and to the school community. If there is an issue, I can guarantee you that the school principal has reached out to the regional and has worked with the regional to resolve that issue. No issues have come to my attention, so either they're at the resolution stage at the school level or at the regional assistant superintendent level.
I asked it only because a couple parents had said that their child is actually having to get up even earlier because they presume that because the typical time that breakfast would be occurring, in the absence of them being able to get their child there, they're just presuming that the kid is missing the breakfast. And so I was just that's why I was asking a little bit about that communication, because if a parent's making that assumption, but they would definitely benefit from that for a variety of ways, that may be one, but thank you for explaining
Absolutely.
how that works.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great.
Ms. Schalheim.
To your points about the vaccination sites for the 5 to 11-year-olds, firstly, that's wonderful. Do you anticipate those being weekend endeavors or after school or both?
I'm going to allow Mrs. Jackson to come. We have
Sorry, you're getting your steps in though, right?
we have, while she's
Need to
coming
put a
back
name
up,
tag there for
while
you.
she's coming back up to the podium, again, it's a good question. We have several different work groups that have been working on several different issues behind the scenes, and this is one of them. And so Mrs. Jackson can share the latest information.
And I like your orange mask.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, for the record, Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent. So our team from the Office of School Performance has been working with principals to set up the potential sites. The reason that we haven't advertised or sent communication out about these sites right now is because they are potential sites still. We don't know. We have to figure out the number of vaccines we'll get. Again, as Dr. Arlato said, the staffing, not from AACPS, but the availability from the Department of Health, because those are going to be our partners. And so once we finalize that, we will definitely be communicating that to the school communities. The sites have been chosen, for a variety of reasons, but we took a look at the map to see accessibility for students. As we do with everything, we looked at our decision-making model, and we looked at the decision-making matrix, as well as we looked at this decision through an equity lens, and went through our protocol in that manner as well.
Thank you for that. Obviously, there's benefits for weekend, but there's also benefits while, students are like an after-school thing while parents might be around, that kind of thing.
Yes,
just something to
absolutely.
consider. It's all very exciting.
Absolutely. So there will be after school as well as Saturday.
Fantastic.
We have not extended to Sunday right now. Again, tentative. I want to
Right.
be very clear. Again, because it is dependent upon not just AACPS staffing, but our Department of Health and whatever partner will be helping us, their availability of staffing.
Wonderful.
But we did take a look at that, and we took a look at some data around some other community events that happen in these communities and things of that nature. Availability of space. So it was a great effort by both the Department of Health as well as the Office of School Performance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson. You can hold tight for a moment. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just have a feeling your name will be brought up again as
Thank
I
you.
ask my question. I want to speak for our high school students. I have heard unanimously from those I've heard of about flex time, how incredibly important that time is from the social emotional aspect and the need for interaction and other types of opportunities during the day. That being said, I understand that at least in a couple of our high schools, and this could be across the board, I don't know, and I'm sure Ms. Omasori can speak to it, but in at Arundel, there's a little bit of chaos involved in students being able to access whatever activity it is that they're attempting to do. So I know of at least two schools from feedback I have where it's flex time. A student shows up at a classroom where they intend to go for this block, and they've reached capacity. And so that student has to have a second choice, and then they go to the second choice, and sometimes that is at capacity. So it can turn into, and Ms. Omasori, I'm bringing Ms. Omasori in because perhaps if it's not an issue at Arundel, are they doing it differently? And should our high schools be sharing best practices to perhaps eliminate some of the confusion?
So I'm guessing you're referring to PM Flex, right?
It is whatever the flex time is that allows students to either go and get help from a teacher or go to a club.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Well, personally, I have a half schedule, so I usually leave at that time. But I do stay a lot for clubs. And I've heard of what you're talking about happen usually at classes where that's really popular. So
it might be the gym.
yeah, well, yeah,
Right.
gym, where like half of the school takes gym at the same time. Something like that might occur. I haven't heard it as like a huge problem, but that's just Arundel. And from what I've heard, it might happen at other schools. So
As I've stated before, I speak to students on a weekly basis, and we will continue to work through this. This is our first year with countywide implementation of this schedule, and so it is absolutely not perfect.
Right.
And I don't want anyone to think that it is perfect. I will also be meeting with principals, and I actually do have a meeting next week about flex time with our regional assistant superintendents, so that, as you said, we can continue to share best practices. So absolutely, it's on our radar. And we also want to make sure it's the safest environment possible. I would encourage anyone who has feedback to also send that to the principal as well as the regional assistant superintendent. I also have a 15-year-old that does not say that. That says that he and his comrades are able to get into their classes and do exactly what they need to, and get the support that they need. So it could be school dependent. And again, we will continue to work to provide the best space possible for our students. But we do need a little time to refine it and make sure that it meets the needs of all of our students.
I have no doubt, absolutely. And that's why I started out by highlighting the importance of this. Yes, there might be a little bit of work to do to fully get it right, but it's worth the effort because the students very much want that opportunity. Thank you. Okay, I see no more lights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson. Okay, next we have the public comment portion of our meeting. And just a brief statement for public comment. Speakers will be allotted 2 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. And speakers are to speak on the topic in which they were approved to speak on. And the bell will indicate when your time has expired. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer session with speakers. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. And first up, we have speaking on agenda item 3.07, the superintendent's report on school operations update. We have Mr. Russell Leone here speaking on behalf of the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County. Good evening, Mr. Leone.
Good evening. Sorry you can't see me smiling, but hello, how are you tonight? My name is Russell Leone. I'm the president of the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County and an elementary school educator. So first of all, Dr. Arlotto, thank you for presenting the information. Those numbers are very enlightening for us and for the board to hear. One thing I would request is you have said that families, students, and educators are a priority, and we want to believe that is true. We want to make sure that we feel that. Right now, many of our teachers are not feeling that. So we ask politely that you continue to engage in meaningful collaboration with us. And that includes how PD is implemented, testing is administered, and quarantining restrictions. And we look forward to helping bargain with you on this. I would also request that, especially around those issues that are impacting all staff, that you bring together not just the Teachers Association, but the other bargaining units together collaboratively. And one thing I will also ask of the board members here tonight is to really examine beyond the numbers that are presented. Tonight I heard you ask a lot of great questions about our students. We also need to ask questions about our teachers and the impacts that those numbers have had on our teachers. For example, in terms of the buses, how much does that impact our educators who have to stay late beyond their work hours to make sure that our students stay safe? And also the impact on teachers being pulled to cover other classes when we are not able to get substitute teachers, or our teaching assistants are also pulled from us. Please continue to ask these questions. They are important because our teachers are, as you may have seen some of the signs tonight, they're burned out and they are exhausted. So we ask that you please continue to collaborate meaningfully with us and really dive deep beyond the numbers that you hear in these type of reports. Thank you. And by the way, welcome, Ms. Dent. I'm sorry, we have not had a chance to meet, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. I'm giving just a moment so that our next speakers can address the board uninterrupted. And I am going to go ahead and call out the next four speakers. You're all welcome to come forward and be seated. And then it's your choice. You can stand up and go to the podium, or there's also microphones at the desk. So I have Lisa Van Buskirk, Catherine Davis, Melissa Eidelman. Oh, three speakers.
Good evening, Board of Education. Lisa Van Buskirk of Start School Later, Anne Arundel County. This is my 8th school year to appear before you and your predecessors to speak, I think 9th since I started attending meetings on the topic of school start times. At one of my first testimonies, I had a toddler and a preschooler and said that I had 10 years before this would affect my children. We're getting really close to that date, but we're also really close to a solution. Other advocates have seen their children graduate high school, college, graduate school, start careers, and have children of their own. The last time I was in this room was for Prismatic Services March 2020 presentation. I left the meeting feeling that the board was indeed moving towards healthy, safe, and age-appropriate school hours for all students. Now we are back to finalize your decision. On behalf of thousands of supporters of Start School Later in Anne Arundel County, and me personally, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Prismatic Services for their 2 years of work with AACPS. In the past 6 months, they accomplished what AACPS has failed to do in the past 6 years. Use the routing software to develop solutions and options for school start times. Every cent of their contract is well spent. Now you must approve an implementation date. You are faced with January 2020 as previously approved, or delay until September 2022. There are many reasons, both logistical and emotional, that could be argued for each date. The entire school system is overwhelmed this school year. Changing start times may sound like piling on the chaos, but it could actually help with student resiliency and mental health. We could hear tonight that transportation is ready for either date with no additional resources needed. That piece of the puzzle is solved. Now you need to hear from Dr. Arlato and his staff regarding concrete details and plans about all the other pieces. As I learned in the military, if you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute, but that does not always yield a plan that survives first contact with the enemy. Is Dr. Arlato's plan ready for January? If not, what assistance does he and his staff need to guarantee success in September? When we talk implementation logistics, it can be easy to forget that there are real faces, names, and families all impacted by the late elementary and early high school start times. When will you offer them relief? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, speaking on item 8.01, policy revision, first reading, non-discrimination code AC, Catherine Davis.
Members of the board, my name is Catherine Davis. I have 2 children in the school system, and I'm a product of the school system myself. As you review the content of the policy, I encourage you to look at other policies for comparison. One county in our state includes the following additional types of discrimination that you may want to consider: ethnicity, ancestry, nationality, immigration status, gender, gender expression, family structure, parental status. Instead of disability, ability, cognitive, social, emotional, and physical. Language, poverty and socioeconomic status, and a catch-all, other legally or constitutionally protected attributes or affiliations. As you think about the policy wording, it would be helpful to define your policy objective. Here's a good example. Our objective is to ensure that people are treated as individuals, respected for their unique attributes, and not excluded, harassed, or bullied in any way. through unconscious bias, stereotypes, or unlawful actions that may form the basis of discrimination or harassment. Treat people as individuals. If that sounds like common sense to you, then it's probably because you've gone through life consistently treated as an individual. I recommend Austin Channing Brown's book, I'm Still Here. She provides insightful examples of what it's like to not be seen. I encourage you to keep putting in the work. Self-reflection is hard, but necessary for empathetic leadership that can benefit all students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Eidelman.
Hello, Melissa Eidelman. In review of your new drafted policy the board will be discussing, we came up with many items of concern. Let's start with a quote from our very own superintendent, Dr. Arletto. Introducing ideas and concept without having these courageous conversations with parents of students from all walks of life. No matter the relationship, we also must be willing to have courageous conversations, even when they may be painful. Our executive team will study Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism this summer. In addition to our student forum, our Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement will team with Kindness Grows, here to host an adult forum later this month. This is a path that can engage and uplift not just our children, but our communities. The realities of these ideas and paths we feel is the exact opposite. And this new policy drafted has many areas of concerns for many of us. What us parents and staff members have seen in your policies is poor implementation and not all-inclusive verbiage. We have seen increased stress, isolations, heartache, anxieties, and student suicides. We see a parent group regarding student safety discuss a ton about what bullying is and how it should be managed, yet sits on social media accounts such as Facebook bullying other parents. A group against bullying that bullies other parents breeds more discrimination and violence. We are asking you to consider having these conversations with us parents in regards to creating policy on us and our students.
Thank you. And you are also signed up for item 8.02 policy revision, violence and vandalism, code KG. Melissa Eidelman.
So in your review of your new drafted policy that you guys will be discussing, we came up with some items of concern in this. We feel you are creating a more divided student, staff, and parent population by using divisive tactics. This is creating a mental health crisis, as well as more discrimination and hate crimes on students and staff of all walks of life. Some examples that contribute to recent violence and vandalisms are unlawful medical requirements and the singling out of staff and student athletes to start. To dive in and dissect what you currently have drafted, we ask, why do you have in here certain verbiage but not others? Such as if you are adding in the word noose, what about anti-police sentiments for the students and staff of police families? If you're going to mention homeless students, you need to mention kids from two-parent homes as well as single-parent homes. What is the board's stance on board members that feel threatened or think they are being threatened by parents exercising their First Amendment rights? Could you add wording in this section as to not infringe on parents' right expressing their concerns at these meetings? What kind of assistance from what law enforcement agency may be used against parents trying to encourage and mobilize them to give public comment? Are you trying to paint concerned parents as committing acts of violence? You are not very specific in this policy, and we are asking for more from you. This policy feels and makes us feel very uneasy yet again with an environment you are creating. I sat here and listened to your last workshop, and I heard over and over about relationship building and difficult conversations. Are you willing to establish and open up a relationship with parents? Personally, I would like a town hall meeting with you all on important subject matters. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment portion of our meeting. And so now we are on item section 6, consent items, award of contracts. We have item 6.01 snow removal and 6.02 water testing. Do I have a motion to?
Motion to bundle.
Second.
All right, Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation.
To bundle?
Oh, sorry, we have to bundle first. We're bundled. Do I have a consensus to bundle?
Yes.
Let's do away with
like
that. Okay. No.
Thank you, Madam
for your
President. Members of the
recommendation to
board,
bundle.
I recommend that the Board of Education authorize the award of the contracts as listed on today's agenda, 6.01 snow removal and 6.02 water testing.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Frank?
Just very briefly, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for continuing with the water testing, especially. I know that a few years ago, that was such a concern to so many parents, and I'm glad that we're kind of getting back on track with that. And also, I just want to thank the staff at the Fort Somalit facility. Before I was a board member, I met with them. They were fantastic. They explained everything that there was about water testing. And I don't hear them brought up very often, so I really wanted to thank you and them. So thank you.
Thank you. They are an outstanding group, and we are glad that we can get back on track, as it were, with the water testing. With one of the rules is you have to have students in the school so that the water is moving through the pipe so that you can test it appropriately. And now that we're back in full in-person learning, we can get back to that. So thank you.
Ms. Corkadell?
The wrong button. Really quick question, Dr. Arlotto. With snow removal, I know these are one of those is in a category that we've been seeing similar in construction and in subcontracting arenas is having shortages as well. Not to lift off a Band-Aid off of an already sore wound, but I was just wondering, are we anticipating a potential of experiencing that for things like snow removal and stuff? Or
You are a maybe clairvoyant. I was in an email exchange with members of my team earlier today. Mr. Shaknovich actually shared an article with several of us, and I think it was from Ohio, where they are already predicting 500 plow drivers short for the upcoming winter season. And so we had a bit of an email exchange to talk about that very thing. And so it is, of course, a concern. This, having contracts with people in advance helps us do that. But you are absolutely right on that it could be something that is impacted to not have at first the state level, so the main roads are cleared, and then the local levels, but then our ability to then clear parking lots. So it all connects, and so
Yeah.
it could be a problem.
So as a follow-up to that, I know in the past, like when we've had predictions of the Snowmageddon years and fall into naturally existing shortages that are because of quantity, not because of overall labor force availability, many of our schools that are relying on walking have to rely on the individual residents as having full responsibility at all times to keep that sidewalk clear. And many communities subcontract that out. I'm just wondering, maybe we should be considering that as a factor too. I know in the past, though, our parents have showed up with shovels and helped out when we've been in a bind on the bigger ones. But it sounds like heads up, folks.
No, it is a good point, and I'll reiterate, as I have in the past during the winter months, that one of the considerations when we do make that decision to either delay opening or close is how quickly the snow has fallen and have residents had a chance to clear sidewalks, not just how the roads are and parking lots and those things. But that's part of what is assessed when the teams are out there on the road at 3 a.m. and checking in all the different areas of the county. That's one of the things that is assessed to see, can our students walk? What do the sidewalks look like? How high is the snow piled up from the plows along the edge of the street? And are those things, that's all part of the algorithm that we use in making those decisions.
Sounds-
So good point.
Sounds like our HOAs may want to invest in considering that. But thank you very much.
And thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Corkadell. And I know it's not related now directly to this contract, Dr. Alato, but since the conversation is happening, 2 questions real quick. So are we taking the position now that perhaps it's going to snow next week, and therefore we're planning now how we're going to creatively get our schools operational as quickly as possible instead of waiting until, and I'm not suggesting you're waiting. I'm just suggesting, are we looking at those creative solutions now, perhaps even a volunteer list at schools to pitch in if needed?
We have the ability to clear our lots and our sidewalks.
Okay.
Right, so our teams can do that work. It's.
Oh, your mic,
I'm
sorry.
Thank you. We have the ability to clear our sidewalks and our lots.
Okay.
We have that capability. It's everybody else moving around the county to then get to the cleared lots at the schools.
That's helpful. Thank you.
We can do that work. It's
But-
everything else that has to occur.
So the second part of my question is, this could create potentially additional days of school closures just because we haven't been able to clear as a county quickly enough, right? So where are we with the possibility of remote learning as snow days if necessary, if it gets us into a big, long, like many days closed?
We are waiting for approval from Maryland State Department of Education.
Okay.
So we are, superintendents around the state are having that conversation. In fact, there is an MSDE work group that is looking at attendance and virtual now capabilities of all the school systems that we now have and how we're able to utilize that, if allowed, on a given snow day.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, on an inclement weather day. Yes.
Yeah. So forgive me. Was there a motion and a second to? Okay. Ms. Howe.
Ms. Schallheim,
Aye.
Ms. Dent,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Omasore,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin,
Aye.
Ms. Ellis.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Item 7.01, administrative personnel appointments, Dr. Alato.
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend that the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and or appointed.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Ms. Howe.
Ms. Schallheim,
Aye.
Ms. Dent,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Omasore,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin,
Aye.
Ms. Ellis.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay. Item 8.01, non-discrimination code AC first reading. Good evening, Ms. Ortiz.
I'm happy I have the tall chair again. Good evening. For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel, and I'm here with my colleague.
Good evening. For the record, Lisa Sneedy, Staff Counsel.
All right. So policy AC, non-discrimination, is before you on first reading. This policy was last revised on January 7th, 2015. The policy has been amended to do a few things. Add an issue section, update the list of protected classes in accordance with Maryland state law, clarify that AACPS complies with federal, state, and local laws that prohibit discrimination, add a prohibition on symbols of hate, which may include, subject to a reasonable forecast of disruption, a noose, swastika, Confederate flag, and any symbol used or identified by a known hate group designed to promote the messaging of the hate group, and citing policies for filing a complaint. Please note that some of the language in the policy regarding symbols of hate mirrors language in 2021 legislation before the Maryland General Assembly, which this board supported. This policy will be on the AACPS website for a 30-day public comment period. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Schalheim?
Yes, thank you for being here. Good evening. So one of our public testimonies we heard tonight addressed a few other various groups. And so just for the record, how can we potentially add those in? May they be added in? How would that work or not work?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the groups that are identified, so this policy deals with unlawful discrimination in accordance with Maryland state and federal laws. The reason why I stated that it was updated, the policy, to align with Maryland state laws, because Maryland state law goes a little further than federal law as it relates to homeless individuals who are homeless. We do have federal laws that relates to students who are homeless, but not necessarily like employees and other individuals. And so the language is aligned with the law. We cannot create additional protected classes. We do have other policies, such as our bullying, bias, as student sexual harassment, misconduct, which is broader to address some of the other groups that were mentioned in the policy. But as far as unlawful discrimination, this policy is aligned with the law.
Thank you for that. And just as one more question of my two-question allotment, on second page 4A, just a word just jumped out at me, and I just want to make sure I understand. Symbols of hate may include. Why is it may and not shall in this instance?
So the reason why it's may include is because, right, it's a list that the last portion of that subsection or that paragraph states any symbol used or identified by a known hate group designed to promote the messaging of the hate group, right? We don't know what those symbols may or may not be and what could meet the constitutional standard to be prohibited. And so given, that we don't have every potential symbol of hate listed, right, because there could be new ones. That's why the may is there. We can't just say a shall. The other reason why as well, you'll notice the subject to a reasonable forecast of disruption. That's the constitutional standard. I will submit to you, however, that a noose, a swastika, and a Confederate flag can be reasonably forecasted to cause disruption and meet that constitutional standard right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
I see no more lights. Next, we have item 8.02, policy revision, first reading, violence and vandalism. And thank you very much for being here. Code KG.
Yes, so policy KG, violence and vandalism, is before you on first reading. This policy was last revised on April 6, 2016. This policy has been amended to align with Maryland state law, specifically 2020 changes to Maryland hate crimes law, which this board also supported. The board may recall that the Maryland hate crimes law was revised due to an experience, unfortunate, abhorrent experience at one of our middle schools, where in 2017, where a noose was strung at the school. As a result of that case, the General Assembly passed legislation 2020 to specifically address nooses and swastikas in the Maryland hate crimes law, but also left it, it's a non-exhaustive list to potentially include other symbols of hate. Accordingly, the added language in sections C1 and C2 come directly from the Maryland hate crimes statute. The language in sections C3 and C4 is in alignment with state law, specifically crimes against property as addressed in the criminal law article and illegal conduct as cited in the education law article. This policy will be on ACPS website for a 30-day public comment period, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I see no questions. Thank you. So now item 8.03, board committees, code BBE.
Yes, so policy BBE, board committees, is before you on first reading. This policy was last revised on September 11th, 2013. This policy has been amended to clarify the purpose and issue sections, add the equity committee as a standing committee of the board, provide clarity regarding, describe the work of the standing committees of the board, provide clarity regarding the chairs of these standing and ad hoc committees, clarify the role of the board president in committees, and clarify collaboration for committee support. This policy will be on the ACPS website for a 30-day public comment period, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I see no questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so
Ms.
much. Have a
Ortiz.
good evening.
Thank you as always, Ms. Ortiz.
So item 9.01, fiscal year 2021 operating budget closeout. Dr. Arlotto?
Yes, ma'am. You have the documentation in front of you for both 9.01 and 9.02, which includes the monthly financial status report. And we've got the team here, the dynamic duo, to answer any questions that you might have regarding these documents and these budgets.
Good evening. Ms. Schallheim?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. It's been so long since I last saw you both. Whole 24 hours. So I have a question about the FY21 closeout. So we've heard time and again the magic number for, or the hopeful magic number for budget surplus is around 13 million. It looks like our surplus, at least on the unrestricted side, was north of 16.5 million. And so what happens to that extra 3 million? How is that being assigned, appropriated, that kind of thing, for, I guess, part of FY22's budget?
Sure. So let us introduce ourselves. Alex Shaknova, Chief Operating Officer.
Matt Stansky, Director of Financial Operations.
So remember when the county government adopted their budget at the conclusion of last year, one of the balancing strategies was an increase in our required fund balance contributions towards the revenue stream of this school district. That is what they adopted on the 14th of June, 2021. Additionally, as you recall, there was just slightly north of $3 million of uncovered salary that the county executive and county council elected not to pick up as a result of a negotiated settlement. And the direction we received from the funding appropriators were that we needed to set that aside. And because we have to actuarially cover it, we set that aside and assigned it for that specific purpose, such that the salaries could be covered going into the next year. So that's kind of the high level overview of why that number is north of what you're accustomed to seeing.
And just remind me, because I don't remember, it's been a million years since June, at least for me, what the county council established as a increase of the fund. Remind me of what they changed, and then what our projected figure going forward will be.
Yeah, so as you noted, typically we budget 13 million in fund balance. They increased that to 15.3, so a $2.3 million increase. And that was, if you remember, to offset the revenue loss of interest income that we were receiving. So so right off the bat, we needed to hit a $2 million target, higher target. And then, as Mr. Shaknovich alluded to, there's the $3 million roughly that we needed to cover from the settlement of salary increases in FY21 that went unfunded by the county as well.
can you indulge me for one more question?
Absolutely.
But each fiscal year is its own silo, 21, 22, 23, so forth. So the mid-year step I understand because that's part of FY22, of course. The loss of interest, they're siloed fiscal years with their own beginning, middle, and end, and their own CAFR or whatever the
Right, so I
acronym is
guess
now.
maybe I should have spoken future tense, the anticipated loss of interest income.
So to cover an anticipated loss in the next fiscal year, we are
Using prior year fund balance to cover
taking
that.
funds to, okay.
Correct.
We knew we were going to under-attain in the interest category. We asked the county government to essentially make the district whole.
Got it.
They opted to not do so and creatively offered us the opportunity to self-correct that interest rate deficiency.
Okay. Heard. But going forward, will our target figure now be 15.3 going forward, or was this just an anomaly based on market?
Essentially, it's a 1 year. I mean, obviously, we're in the midst of looking at the budget landscape right now, and by the time the superintendent delivers his recommendation to the board, we'll have a better picture on the interest rate environment. All of that said, at present, we are still not seeing a robust increase in the interest rate environment. So I don't see the interest rate cavalry coming to the rescue, at least in the public sector, because our credit rating on the, our interest rate ability is very low, and we are obligated by law to only invest in super secure, translated to low interest rated instruments.
Okay. Then, sorry, one more. Is that terrible? Okay, I apologize. So in our budget book every year, we see, budget surplus, and we see a smaller amount than what ends up being our budget surplus. And that smaller amount is, unappropriated, unassigned, unencumbered. Are we looking towards having the whole projected amount of the fund balance not being appropriated upfront and being treated as that smaller amount on page, I don't remember, I used to be able to quote them, as a way of treating the fund balance, as opposed to having it result on what we've underspent in categories or over asked for, or both, just be an unassigned, unappropriated amount from jump and handled in that way as that smaller amount is?
So a couple answers. One that, fortunate or unfortunate, it really doesn't matter. That's simply not the way that the Maryland school financing laws are structured. That's not a revenue source. That number did go down. It's lower this year than it was, last year, and lower than it's been in the past couple years. So, if you're operating north of a $1.3 billion budget now, and you've got about a $2.3 million shock absorber, a lot of stuff can happen between now and next June 30th. Like, a lot of stuff can happen. And we have a cavalry the size of about $2.3 million to tackle, a $1.3 billion budget. So it's prudent for us to have an emergency fund of some sort to cover unanticipated, activities. And that's really what the unassigned category then results in is that household emergency account should our water heater writ large, break, or the roof, get blown off, et cetera. So just recently, we suffered some pretty significant storm damage at one of our facilities. That wasn't budgeted. We don't see a lot of reimbursement activity coming down the pike, so most of that's going to have to be covered out of pocket. To the extent that storm damage is going to cost a rather sizable sum. We've already been turned down by FEMA and other sources that we've made applications to. That's likely going to come out of this unassigned fund balance and draw that number down pretty pretty drastically between now and next June.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Corkadell?
Thank you, President Ellis. Thank you, Mr. Chignovich and Mr. Stansky. So just a quick question to refresh my memory, because it's been a few years and I got to thinking about this again. The state enables the county to have a rainy day fund and to populate it. With local education agencies, like it's not in our category right now, but in order for it to maybe be created in future, would that be something that would require state enabling legislation? Or is that like a hard, the state has to go in and legislate it uniquely? Or is that something that is left up to the local municipality to determine if they would be willing to entertain? How would that work if we wanted to have a lockbox contingency similarly set up that other local government agencies have? Because other school districts, when you leave the state of Maryland, they have that because they're able to fund themselves. So that they create the funding, so they usually do that. I was just wondering, what mountain would we have to climb in order to get us there?
Yeah, very important point, right? Maryland is like a state like, unlike no other, because we cannot raise debt. We don't have taxing authority. We don't have the ability to raise revenue outside of really de minimis, minimal, sort of revenue. So essentially our funds do have to be budgeted. Currently, at a minimum, it would require MSDE action, probably at a minimum. Remember, counties do not live under the same umbrella as we do, or municipal governments in terms of finance.
Correct.
Ours is much more prescriptive and constrained. They don't just have a revenue. They've got a fund balance. They have a revenue stabilization fund. They have a rainy day fund. I think the county's got 4 or 5 different funds.
Yeah.
We have 0, right? We've got none.
Plus there's a CAO contingency.
Yeah, so they got like 4 or 5 over
yeah.
there. So we really don't have that, and that's just not the way schools within the state of Maryland are contemplated by the state of Maryland to operate. So it would really, at a minimum, it would take some MSDE involvement, and then it would be, with input from the external auditors and maybe AG involvement as well to see what the constraints are, to setting something up. But we couldn't just unilaterally do that ourselves, absent.
That's why I was asking, like, where do we need to poke if we wanted to get there? Because when you think about some of the things that have occurred and how long our process is to go back for the Mother May I in critical crisis situations, being it's their money anyways to manage and operate, and it would be in the same level of criteria, it may be something worthwhile to look into in the coming years. But thank you very much for your information on that.
I see no more questions. Thank you very much. So now we have come to item 5.01, Prismatic Services, Inc. final recommendation, but we are going to break for 10 minutes so that we can switch the format of this meeting and stretch our legs for a moment. Thank you. All right, we are back in our self-situated. All right, we're back and ready for item 5.01, Prismatic Services final recommendation. Dr. Arlotto, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're delighted to be joined with we are delighted that Dr. Prieto from Prismatic has joined us this evening. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us in person, but through some great work of our team and Okay. We're back on. Thank you again. We are delighted to have Dr. Prieto from Prismatic join us, and I'm going to turn it over to her and let her get started. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, members of the board, superintendent, district leadership, and stakeholders for joining me in this presentation. Also, thank you very much for allowing me to do this virtually. I had another board presentation earlier today in Texas, and with air travel being what it is, I did not want to risk trying to make a flight from here to there and try to get there in time. Tonight, I'm going to review phase 2, stage 2 of our transportation consulting work. And for just the benefit of Dr. Dent, phase 1 was the report that we presented to the school board back in March of 2020, which was the review of the transportation department, a broad review of the entire department. Phase 2 has been the routing work and analysis to analyze what the requirements might be for changes in school start times. Next slide, please. So phase 2, stage 1 is what I reported to the board on in June. That was where we took existing data from the district, and essentially did a massive, lengthy spreadsheet exercise, re-tiering within attendance zones using the existing runs and data on run times and deadhead times between schools and drops and pickup areas to see, at the 20,000, 30,000 foot level, is it possible to get to the desired school start times with sort of the existing runs and routes. I reported to you on that in June that, proof of concept wise, it looked like it would be close. It was a question of, would further optimization work, and in actually looking through the routing, would that get us to where we needed to be potentially cost neutral in doing new school start times. And proof of concept in stage 1 said yes. The board gave approval at that point for us to go into stage 2, which is where we are now. Next slide, please. So our work in stage 2 is a lot more data intensive. Additional data collection. We're working with a different student database for many of the attendance zones we're working in, mapping students to stops, applying the lessons that we learned in the proof of concept work, and that's the nitty-gritty details of, over here in this attendance zone, it looks like we could probably combine these things. We learned about middle schools that could be transported together, and so we could combine buses there where it makes sense. All of those kinds of lessons that we learned in stage 1 were applied here. Then improving run efficiencies. This is the areas where we've talked about the last 2 times I presented, talking about things like taking short run times and adding, 2 bus runs of 10 minutes apiece would become 1 bus run of 20 minutes apiece. 2 buses each with 10 or 15 students assigned would become 1 bus. Those kinds of things are what's considered run efficiencies. And then having the transportation department check the work and developing the routing plan. We're currently cycling back and forth between those last 3 dots on the arrow, improving run efficiencies, having AACPS check, and developing the routing plan. Next slide, please. And then just as a reminder, the proof of concept methodology that is carried through from stage 1 into stage 2 is that we're reworking to get to these goals. Elementary schools starting between 8 and 9 a.m., middle schools between 8:30 and 9:15, and then high schools at 8:30. To borrow Alex's terminology, 8:30 high school start time is our stake in the ground on this project, and everything's kind of rotating around that. Then we're optimizing within attendance zones to work towards a total of about 518 regular education buses in service for AACPS schools. 518 is about what you have now. And so if we get to that point for regular education services, we're at a cost neutral solution. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you where we are in stage 2 so far. And so the yellow bands in the top and the bottom are what your current school start times are. So for your elementary schools, your start times are currently between 8:10 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. Your elementary schools get out between 2:35 and 4:05. Middle schools are currently between 8:10 and 9:25, and your high school is currently at 7:30. The goals of this project are the lighter green bands, where we're trying to move the elementary schools to 8 to 9, middle schools 8:30 to 9:15, and high schools to 8:30. What we're finding in doing the nitty-gritty routing work is that we are going to have elementary schools in the range of 8 to 9 a.m. They're not all going to be at the same time. Many of them, the majority of them, are probably going to be at that 8 a.m. Time frame, but we are going to have some starting as late as 9 o'clock. That's going to result in elementary schools getting out between 2:25 and 3:25. Although this wasn't a specific plan when we started, it's looking like putting all of the middle schools at 9:15 starts with a 3:55 end time is going to work best within the routing. And then this, of course, leads to 8:30 is still the stake in the ground for high schools with a 3:18 dismissal time. So that's what we're working towards, and that's sort of what it's looking like for all of the schools. Next slide, please. This slide has a lot of details on it. It also includes a typo. It is the stage 2 results for the morning, so please ignore the column with the AM, PM. I managed to repeat an error from the last time I presented this slide. These are all AM. And so what you see on this slide is the number of buses used originally, what you are currently doing in regular routing work. And so for Annapolis, there are 53 buses used in the morning to provide all the runs and routes that are within the Annapolis attendance zone. When you add those up by attendance zone, you don't get to 518, you get to 713. The difference between those are border crossers. And so, for example, you may have a bus that does one run in the Chesapeake attendance zone and then bops across the border and does 2 runs in the Northeast attendance zone. And you've got a number of those. In fact, you have almost 200 of those in existence right now in your routing plan. When we started this project, we wanted to try to simplify to clean things up. One of the things that my team had the advantage of that the transportation department didn't have the luxury of being able to do is we were able to start from scratch. And so we said, all right, it makes a lot of sense operationally and management wise, as much as possible, to put all the attendance zone buses in keep them all within an attendance zone. So, and it also makes the analysis easier to be able to pull and look at just Annapolis, just Arundel, just Broadneck, and look at the routing and the tiering and timing within attendance zones. So what you see in the 4th column is where we are right now, phase 2, stage 2, with how many buses we're using in the solutions that we're proposing. So for Annapolis, we're proposing a solution that uses 36 buses within that attendance zone, and so on and so forth, all the way down to Southern, which is my least favorite attendance zone, where right now we need more buses than are currently being used to service that zone. You'll see that we've gone from 713 to 561, which is a change of 152. Please note these are not actual buses. Each of those could be that previously you had, again, 1 run in Chesapeake, 2 runs in the Northeast, and now we've eliminated the need for that 1 run in Chesapeake, thus eliminating a border crossing need. Again, we're not final because the 561 is not at the 518. We've got about 4 more weeks worth of work, we estimate, to both get the transportation department to review and give us a thumbs up on the work that we've done, as well as to do some more grinding down in terms of optimization to get to that 518. Next slide, please. So the next 4 weeks of work that we have planned, we have weekly meetings already scheduled every Friday with the transportation department to review the planned morning reworks that we've submitted. And we've submitted 7 of those already, and an 8th will be happening this week. We're going to tackle them 1 or 2 each week and figure out, where the transportation department has any remaining concerns, what their expertise on the ground tells us about, what we've got and what may work better or what needs to be reworked, those kinds of things. We also have additional optimization work. Within the 8 attendance zones that we have tackled in the Compass Sayon routing sandbox that we have not done much work at all yet in terms of optimization, combining 2 5-minute runs into a 10-minute run, putting better filling buses, and thus reducing the need for buses. And we have not begun to look at, okay, we're at 5X, and to get to 518, do we need to reintroduce some border crossing buses if we have a little capacity in one zone and we can use it over in an adjacent zone? So those pieces still need to happen. We also need to then confirm that the morning reworks function effectively during the afternoon runs. Now, for those of you who do routing, usually, you do either the morning or the afternoon, you flip it over and essentially see, how much of that works in mirror in the afternoon, and then you make adjustments around the edges where it doesn't quite work. Remember, your schools do not all have the same length of school day, and so that may result in some adjustments being needed. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, at this point, the Prismatic team is willing to affirm that it is possible to adjust school start end times with little to potentially no increase in the number of regular education buses. And that's with the parameters that we've been assigned. There is an asterisk to this affirmation, however. This does not include any additional buses the district may wish to use to address existing overcrowding. We spoke about that, I think, at length in June, and I think again in August. Our work in looking at essentially how many students you have assigned to a school, enrolled in a school that are eligible for busing versus how many buses you had assigned to provide services to those students. Straight spreadsheet exercise, we calculated as many as 32 buses would be needed, with 28 of those needed in high schools, these high schools: Annapolis, Broadneck, Crofton, North County, Northeast, and Severna Park. To the extent that we can, we're going to try to get that need down during the next 4 weeks. You've got, even within those 6 different high schools, we have some buses that don't currently have a full load already assigned to them. So maybe we can work some of that down. But whatever the board decides to do within the existing overcrowding, that is independent really of the school start time, end time adjustment discussion. Next slide, please. Prismatic recognizes that the school start and end time discussion is really a school board decision. You've asked us to tell you whether or not it could be done with the existing transportation assets that you have for regular education busing. We say that yes, you can adjust to the parameters you've given us with little to potentially no additional increase in buses. However, we'd be remiss if we didn't again say, they're adjusting the routing plan for new school start times is really only step 1 if you're doing a change as dramatic as the board is considering. There are many other pieces that would have to come into play once you make a decision on what the new school start times will be. There's a community messaging plan that needs to be developed. Parents need to know for sure what their new school start time is going to be, but then they also need to potentially adjust their work schedules, adjust for new childcare requirements. Students need to understand what the changes are going to be. Daycares need to adjust their offering hours to meet the new school start and end times in their local community. Agencies that provide internships to students will have to adjust how their programs operate. There's many components to adjusting school start times that need to be implemented before the actual change. The district will need to consider operational adjustments. Changes to the school start times will result in changes to breakfast and lunch schedules. It could also, which impacts your employees, but it could also impact, when your deliveries are scheduled for food deliveries to the schools. Contracts for employees that include specific hours of work would need to be renegotiated. If you adopt the schedule that you've asked us to explore, your athletic directors probably need to design a whole new set of game schedules, for example. There's many pieces to adjusting school start times. Within the transportation world, again, the new school start times is just the first step. Everything that we've looked at in your routing system indicates that we're going to have to renegotiate almost every one of your bus contracts, even if by some small miracle one of your contractors ends up with pretty much the same set of runs, which it would be, they'd definitely be in the minority to begin with. But even if they do that, are in that group, their school times will be different, and so their hours of work will be different, and so we're going to have to renegotiate those things. Given a change of this magnitude, it's always a best practice to do dry runs of your new bus routes in actual conditions, which means if you're shifting from a 7:30 high school time to an 8:30 high school start time, your new bus run would be run on a weekday during that 7:30 to 8:30 time period, so we could see what actual traffic conditions look like. And with a change of this magnitude, this can't be something that you do the day before the new school start times are implemented. We recommend at least 2 weeks. Finish all the dry runs 2 weeks prior to rolling out new school start times, so you have time to make adjustments, and so you have the best chance for a smooth rollout on the new start day. And then we may end up having to do some pre-rollout adjustments on the basis of that. You will also potentially have to talk with crossing guards and say, okay, we know we had you planned over here and over here with the old school start times. With the new school start times, we may need to do something else. We may need to negotiate new agreements with local law enforcement, wherever they've been providing assistance in smooth flow of traffic. We're going to have to ask them to assist in those things. So there's a lot of pieces once you decide to move forward, if you decide to move forward with new school start times, that need to come into play even after the routing piece is done. Next slide, please. Be happy to entertain any questions the board has about the work.
Oh, did I disappear? Sorry. Oh, here I am. Sorry, technical difficulties here. Dr. Prieto, thank you very much for your presentation. And we miss you here in the boardroom. And I think it makes sense on this one. I'm going to go around, and certainly if you don't have a question, then great. And as long as they don't get too involved, like it could be, you know, a quick question, but use your judgment. I'll say 2 to 3 questions per board member, and then we'll go around that way. Starting with Ms. Shawham. We're not hearing you.
Oh my. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you, albeit virtually. I do have a couple of just super quick questions. So I assume that this board is going to move forward. It's just a matter of month of implementation, not if, but when. And so to make sure that this happens successfully, do we know, are you helping us champion this through, or is that the transportation department? Can you help me understand, like, who has there been someone assigned to help shepherd this through to make sure it's successfully rolled out?
I can speak a little to that. Our work, you know, the endpoint for our work in phase 2, we think is about 4 weeks away, in terms of we have a good initial routing plan set up, and leave the district with that. One of the things I didn't talk about a lot in the presentation is that between the last time I spoke and now, we've actually, you know, gone on a slightly different track in how we're doing the nitty-gritty of the work. And we're working directly in a sandbox within the district's own routing software. There are a bunch of reasons why we decided to do that. But I think the end result is that it will leave the transportation department with an easy flip. And so the way a routing sandbox works, if you got a solution you like in there, you can just go, okay, turn it on and use that as your routing package. And so I think that's one of the benefits of the additional path we decided to take. And we hope to leave the transportation department with a set of routes that functions within the parameters that we provided. Now, please note we're working with this year's data. And so, one of the things that will have to happen if you elect to adopt it to starting next year is, some massaging. Kids come into the school, kids go out of the school. We may need to make some further adjustments. There are other pieces. And so, we'd be happy to, stay on to help with that work after phase 2 is completed. But that, that's up to the board and the COO and the transportation department, how we roll out that, how y'all roll out that piece.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Just trying to think. Would it help with further efficiency if we also then adopted an opt-in program for transportation? It would have to work hand in hand, right? Because we're assigning students to buses, and so therefore this could only truly be successful with an opt-in program, or would the opt-in program just assist in our keeping the efficiency going forward?
The work that we are doing is not assuming any efficiencies that you would gain from doing an opt-in program. If you choose to do an opt-in program, you will quite likely gain substantial efficiencies from the number of parents who are willing to stand up and say, you know what, I drive my kid to school every day. That's not going to change. You can give away my seat on the bus. And we talked about that a lot in the last board meeting. Once you do that, in order to gain those additional efficiencies, you're going to want to, again, look at the routes and say, okay, at this elementary school, we had 5 buses running. Enough parents said that they did not want to take the bus or would not use the bus, that now we only on paper need 3 buses. But what does that look like? It's not just that I keep doing the same 5 routes with 3 buses. I obviously want to reroute and route down to where I actually need to provide service. And so that would be additional efficiencies. This work is not assuming that you do that. I think my hopes for that you all would do that were pretty clear the last board meeting, just because I think it would be additional benefit to you. But that would be additional routing work afterwards.
Fantastic. And then very quickly, last question. We've had stops in the past that were sort of on or along a street. Obviously, that's not a bus stop. That's a general place on a road. Are those disappearing, I hope, with your work with the transportation department?
In order to route in a transportation system, those have to disappear. And so what are they replaced by? They're replaced by, if we have it on and along, one of the things that I think is largely true in the way your transportation department does routing, those on and alongs indicate it's not safe to establish a bus stop on this road. So you're going to drive down that road on and along, and you're going to pick up kids who live on that road. And so what that is replaced by in a computerized routing system is each year, how many kids live on that on and along? We're going to have a bus stop for each one of those kids. Now, if it turns out not to be true that it's not safe and you could have a bus stop, you would establish one. But I think generally what it is the on and alongs are replaced by, there are 3 kids who live along that 1.5 mile road, and we need to stop at each mailbox to pick up each one of those students.
Got it. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
You too.
Ms. Dent, do you have any questions? I think you're muted. Am I? Yeah, this part. The microphone. Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you, President Ellis. Thank you.
You're kind of
in and out.
Oh yeah, your mic. The swing. There we go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Hey, it's always great to have the help of your colleagues. Thank you so much. And once again, Dr. Prieto, thank you so much for the report. Just a couple questions. You gave a good bit of information about some plans that need to be made before this would be started the start time. So I think the last time you were here, I did ask you a question about the mid-year implementation. You made the comment that you've never seen that done in another school system. So I wanted you to comment about that and a couple other things. In terms of the buses, how filled will these buses be? Will there be 3 children per seat? Will there be standing room only? And 2 other points, and then I'll let you take over. Did you consider at all our current bus crisis in anything that you did? And finally, will there be a big change in pickup areas for students? Will they have to walk longer distances to get to their bus stop? Thank you.
Okay, item number 1, the mid-year change. That is still correct. I've never seen a district do it, particularly a whole-scale change like this. When I raised that concern several months ago with staff, the comment was, well, we managed to, flip to different start times for virtual learning during COVID. So, flexing again may not be so difficult. I can't speak to that. I wasn't there for the district's experience of that flip and then the flip back with in-person learning. I do think that, there's no really, I was going to say standard, but there's really no standard, but the general practice has been to, do it at a new school year. That gives people time to adjust things. That gives the transportation department time to not only, fine tooth comb the new routing plans, but also do that with the new student body. And so I think that that's the traditional method of doing this. There are always so many things that come to light when you make a big change like this. And I'm not overstating it to say that this will affect everybody in the district. And so, I would advise caution in terms of, when we make the switch. In terms of item number 2, number of students per seat, our analysis using our TransFinder path is not overfilling the seats. We worked with the transportation department and agreed that at the high school level, 2 students per seat is considered a full bus. At the elementary level, we are looking at 2.5 students per seat as a full bus. And as we are doing the work in the Compass sandbox, we're checking to see what routes with the existing student data exceed those limits, and we're flagging those as we go because those do need to be reworked. So no, it's not a 3 student per seat in any iteration that we're looking at. As far as the current crisis, no, our work is independent of what's currently going on. What I do think may be a result of this is, if the district decides to go with this new school start time schedule and implements the routing plan that we're developing for the district, there are potentially some efficiencies within there. I'm not saying we're going to get below the 518, but maybe we're making schedules that are more palatable for some of your contractors in the sense of, trying to eliminate border crossers. What does that do for a contractor? That eliminates deadhead time. If I'm circling around within the broad neck attendance zone providing services and doing 3 runs in there, as a contractor, that's potentially better in terms of less deadhead than doing 1 run in Chesapeake and going over and doing 2 in the Northeast. And so maybe the runs are more rationalized and more palatable. I would suggest to you also that if you do elect to do an opt-in, that should reduce your need for busing, and that may help with your crisis. And so then what was the 4th thing you asked, Mr. Stowers? I'm sorry, Hopeworth, I'm sorry.
Will there be a big change in terms of the distance that students would have to walk in order to get to their bus stop?
Okay. So in terms of looking at that, potentially, yes. Not, I wouldn't say big change, but I think we are trying to rationalize it. Again, the transportation department did not have the luxury of saying, let's start with a blank slate and start over again with routing. They've been living with a system that they've had for decades. And so one of the luxuries that my team has had is that we are artificially starting with a blank slate. And so we adopted some rules and as far as what we would look at in terms of walk distances. Let me flip to what we decided there. Yes. And so one of the rules that we did in our TransFinder work, students can be expected to walk a reasonable distance to a bus stop, provided the path to the stop is safe. Pre-K and kindergarten students can walk up to a quarter mile to a stop. Elementary students can walk up to a half a mile, and middle and high school students can walk up to 3/4 of a mile. This was a newly explicit consideration in district route planning. This was not something that previously was explicit in what the district was doing. And I will say that in looking at the totality of your existing routing, in some cases you were already applying that kind of walk distances, but in other cases you were not. So for a board member, the next question will be, how many phone calls am I going to get from angry parents because the bus stop is no longer at the end of my driveway? More than a few, probably. But that will be necessary in order to, achieve the efficiencies you need to keep this at a fairly cost neutral solution.
Thank you.
Ms. Dent, would you like me to come back to you? Ms. Frank?
Yes, thank you. I just have one question kind of to piggyback off of some of the thoughts that I think Mr. Silkworth had. Are we going to see an increase in the number of students who will not be eligible for a bus now? And do you have an approximate number of how many students are going to need to increase their walk distance?
So in answer to the first part of your question, we're not increasing the walk zones around any of the schools. And so your existing no bus transportation zones around each school are 1.5 miles for middle and high schools, 1 mile for elementary, but 1/2 mile for pre-K kindergarten. The exception to that is collector stops for magnet schools, which can be more than 1.5 miles from a student's house. But that's part of the conversation when a family signs up for a magnet school and they're aware of that and agree to that. So we're not changing those at all. In terms of how much further students may have to walk and how many of the students, gosh, it really depends attendance zone by attendance zone, what we're looking at. In many cases, where we see the greatest potential for optimization is within neighborhoods where, we previously had 3 stops that are, 900 feet apart. Now we're going to make 1 stop in the middle. And so I wouldn't call a 450-foot walk an increase. Technically it is, mathematically it is. But I think the heart of what you're asking is, how many kids are we going to be expecting to now walk 3/4 of a mile when before the bus stop was in front of their door? Those cases are few. It's more so we're consolidating some stops in order to speed run times up, because every time we stop a bus, it costs us a minute and a half. We want to consolidate a number of buses where you're playing the game between filling the bus and a reasonable run time. And so, consolidating stops helps us with that runtime piece. I don't know, quite honestly, with the routing system, if we will be able to provide you an explicit answer to that question when we're done. But I will ask the routing team if that's something that we can pull out.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to just to make sure that as we're increasing walks, and I know last time we talked about getting dark, and I just want to make sure we're still on track with, we don't have any kids walking in the dark because of how far they have to walk and how how their time is adjusted. That's all the same, correct?
Yes, we're working towards a goal of elementary bus stop pickup times, because they're going to be the first tier, right? At 7:10 or later, because civil twilight is as late as 7:11. And so far, that's not shaken out to be a huge concern. We may have a few places, but what I'm also finding as we begin to optimize is we have a few more schools every week shifting from an 8 a.m. start, the elementaries, to an 8:30 or 9 a.m. start. And so that takes them totally out of the civil twilight concern. And it just happens to work out to be the best solution routing wise.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Ms. Corkadell?
See if I can get, okay, is that better? There we go. So you had mentioned some deadhead time in your findings, as you've been working through it. Are you able to provide an overview of what the amount of deadhead time that we're experiencing currently? Or some
For
sort of
the
analysis of it?
for the border crossing buses, or for your system in total?
Both, actually.
Not off the top of my head, and I don't have those figures right now, but it's actually something we could provide to you once we are completed, at least in round numbers. Yeah.
No, that'd be great. Thank you so very much. I think it'll be helpful in our oversight in the coming years too, for any implementation as a benchmark, because that is where any trucking industry has never want deadhead time when possible. Thank you very much. I don't have any other specific questions that you did not answer the last time or have not been provided. Thank you.
Ms. Omasori?
All right, can you hear me? So I don't have a lot of questions that haven't already been asked, but I'd like to thank you first and foremost for being able to join us. And you've made very, very clear that this kind of would change everything. So it puts a lot of things in perspective. One question I have, this is just kind of like a sidebar. I didn't notice Chesapeake Science Point on your initial list, and I'm wondering how many buses that would add or kind of subtract to get kids back and forth from that school.
Chesapeake Science Point is a magnet school?
I believe it's
a
Charter.
charter school.
It's a charter
Ms.
school. Okay.
Omasori, let me
So
tackle
it's
that
not
one,
on our
Dr.
list.
Yeah, Dr. Prieto.
Oh, they're their own, okay.
Our charter and contract schools, Ms. Omasori, are independent. They arrange for their own transportation services, and they actually even elect what the rules by which their transportation services, need to operate. So that is outside of the scope of Prismatic, and it's actually outside of the scope of Anne Arundel County Schools because we allow them the luxury of operating independently, including their transportation decisions.
Okay, all right. Well, then my only question, and I'm not sure if this is already asked, but how will this plan, I don't know if you have to take the current bus shortage into account, but affect the prospect of activity buses and by that extension, extending activity buses to more schools?
So I think that a lot of that part remains to be seen. I think that the potential for activity buses for middle schools increases greatly just by looking at it, because all the middle schools will be the last school served. And so they can do their runs and then they have no other assignments potentially except for activity runs or sports. How it impacts the high schools, I don't know that we get a huge amount of activity buses, additional activity bus capacity out of this because of how we're stacking things up. We've got, let's see, you previously had a 2 to 4. Now we've got a 3 to 4. I think you may get a few more constraints within the high school world, and just in terms of if the regular buses are what were also your activity buses, your high schools may be a little more constrained because most of your attendance zones have as their limiting factor the number of high school runs that are necessary. You have big high schools, they take the most buses. And so they do their runs and then they have to go on and do the middle school runs. In most cases, there are a few exceptions to this, but in most cases, let's say you have 25 runs for the high school, and then you probably have 20 runs for the middle school in that attendance zone. And so you've got a few extra buses there that once they finish the high school, they could provide activity services there. But I don't think we're gonna have it. You're not gonna have huge additional possibilities for activity runs at the high school level. It is gonna open up possibilities at the middle school level because they will be the last of the day.
And if I can just build slightly on what Dr. Prieto already indicated, though, is remember that all of the 19 middle schools are going to be running after the high schools. So to Dr. Prieto's point, not only do we need those buses to run those 19 middle schools, but also our 13 comprehensive high schools have pretty robust athletic schedules because the high schools will be ending about 45 minutes earlier, give or take, than the middle schools will. Many of those buses are going to have to be tasked with supporting the comprehensive athletic program, which will unfortunately further eat into or erode the number of buses that potentially could support additional co-curricular high school activities, if that helps any.
So just to be clear, basically what you're saying is that it works against in the favor of activity buses, or at least for the high school level.
I don't think we see a huge potential to gain anything for activity buses for the high school level. No, I think that, where you might see some daylight in that area is if we get further efficiencies and we can reduce the high school burden in terms of regular education needs for those buses, then maybe we free up some other resources there. But our first priority is making sure that our regular education program is covered. And then we have to go outside of that. One of the things that the district could attempt with co-curricular, extracurricular, is that can be done outside of this bus fleet. We're talking about a portion essentially of the buses that are serving your district. We're not talking in this about 518 buses, the special education buses. We're not talking about the buses assigned to provide services to the private schools within the district. These are not the only buses that are available. But I recognize that historically, these are the buses that have been doing your sports and your activities. And I don't think we're going to get huge gains for high school in terms of additional activity availability.
All right, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Dr. Tobin?
Thank you, Dr. Prieto. It's good to see you again. So I have a couple of questions. So with regard, you said something about earlier about safety, of routes and stops. Have you looked at, particularly in the Annapolis area, which is more urban, as you consider where stops are, and the walking routes, sometimes while they're technically within the range, are along heavily traveled roads and so on. Has that kind of thing been taken into consideration as you?
Not to the degree you're asking about. One of the rules of engagement that we adopted for this project was an assumption that existing bus stops are considered to be safe. This project did not have the time or the budget bandwidth to go ahead and assess the safety of every single stop. I mean, that requires, an on the ground, let's go look. And so we assumed your current stops are safe. One of the things that we are not doing as much of in the Seance sandbox as we attempted to do in our TransFinder work is, explicitly, dragging out walk zones, perhaps, to the limit kind of thing. We're not doing as much of that because we're finding efficiencies in other ways, in how we're combining the runs and how we're stacking the pieces together into the tiering. Could you be doing more of that later on in the transportation department? Sure. That's kind of ongoing work for a transportation department. But no, we did not explicitly analyze specific stops to say that one's unsafe. We assume that the stops that you currently have are safe.
Okay, thank you. And this, I don't know if this is a question just for you or also for Dr. Arlotto, but it's an extension to some extent, I think, of a question Ms. Schalheim asked earlier. And that is sort of the handoff of this to our transportation department. How do you think that's going to work? When big agencies that have a huge initiative will often hire, a czar of some kind, somebody to oversee this particular thing. Obviously, we're probably not in a position to do that, but it does seem to me, based on one of your slides where, you rightly laid out for us all the other pieces of the work that has to be done to make this happen, everything from messaging to contract negotiations and so on, is going to require, somebody to keep their eye on all of those things, which may cross many departments, everything from food service delivery, as you said, to other areas. So I wondered if you could comment, and also as you think about that, sort of where are we in your estimation, or in Dr. Arlotto's estimation, or Mr. Sheknovich's estimation, with regard to having the routing staff who can keep this going, because obviously, routes are not static things necessarily. So.
So the list we provided to you is, sort of our lessons learned from working with various school districts over the years. My goal is to, if you choose to adjust school start times, to help you avoid as many potholes in the road as possible. That's the origin of that laundry list of here's everything that, you need to think about. In terms of districts that I have seen make changes, they have had a point person, usually within the district, often with some external consulting support, but there's usually a point person within the district who leads that. And I'm going to end up throwing Mr. Sagnovich under the bus. And in the other district we work with, it was the COO who. I didn't know this question was coming. Otherwise, I would have prepared you. And so, but it stands to reason that within that reporting structure, because many of the things we're talking about are operational in nature. Obviously, there's also a heavy HR component to it. If we're renegotiating contracts for your TAs and the crossing guards, there's an HR component to it as well. But it is it's not a small lift for someone who already has full-time work on their plate. In terms of where your transportation department routing team is, I'm thrilled that y'all hired the routing FTE that we recommended for you. And I think that they are, even in the last 9 months where, my conversations with them, back at the beginning of this year to where we are now, we're growing by leaps and bounds there in terms of their ability to, route dynamically, take on new things. One of the pieces that isn't necessarily in their control is how we condition your contractors to be dynamic and flexible, because those have all been, some of them have been fairly static contracts for years.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to work with that. I don't know that I would say, are you asking me, what's going to be the limiting factor in the success in the transportation department side? I don't think it's going to be the routing department. I think, our ability to negotiate the contractors and have them understand, we're doing something different. And I know, your bus driver has been doing the same run for 20 years, but it's time to do something different. I think that, experience tells me that that may be the bigger pothole in the road when we get there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
If I may, Dr. Tobin, to expand on your question and Dr. Prieto's response, we'll have an implementation team. As we do in any major project, we already have that part of that implementation team up and running. And that has already been meeting behind the scenes to talk about a number of those issues that are on Dr. Prieto's list. Of course, it's great to have the experience that her team has in doing this around the country, and so we can learn and not have to reinvent the wheel, as it were. But we already have a partial implementation team up and running and discussing some of those issues. We'll also assign a project manager to this. And just because he's listening in, maybe I'll nominate Walt Federowitz for that. He might really enjoy taking on that role and responsibility, so I'll nominate Walt. There you go, pal. That one's for you.
Gee, thanks. Gee, thanks.
That's what you get for not being here in person, pal. Sorry. So, but we will have a project manager. We have already discussed, Mr. Sheknovich and I, the possibility of hiring an outside person for that as a possibility, or others that can assist us. This is, as Dr. Prieto says, this will be a big lift in lots of areas, not the least of which will be the renegotiation of contracts with all 15 of our current vendors. That will be a big lift, but lots of things will be happening in parallel once this work is done in the next month or so, and all those routes get handed off to our routers. As Dr. Prieto said, they're in the sandbox, and they'll be able to be easily transferred over into our system, or it is the same system, and we'll be able to do that work going forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So I jotted down some questions, and I think these are somewhat related, so I'll try and whittle it down. So Dr. Prieto, you talked about little to no cost. You mentioned 32 buses needed, 28 are high schools. So just to revisit that briefly, this is based on your team meeting certain parameters that we're currently not meeting. So you're talking about meeting certain parameters that every student eligible to ride has a seat, and based on the students per bus parameters that you're working with, right? So to revisit, the additional buses that are needed, it's not in order to implement start times, it's in order to meet those parameters. And so any cost involved isn't directly related to changing start times. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you could potentially still find greater efficiency if we were not relying on, in other words, if someone took on the project, let's say, within the transportation department down the line of sort of starting from scratch and not relying on current runs, could come up with a totally different scenario that might be even more efficient. Is that right?
Yes, I would suggest to you that, the next, large routing effort potentially start with where we're going to leave you, because I think we've tried to take out some historical, we need another bus over here, but now we've got another bus, let's do some extra over here. We're trying to rationalize that out as we work within attendance zones. So I would suggest perhaps starting from there, and then seeing where we can whittle down further. But I mean, absolutely, if the district decided that, within the parameters that we're currently working with, that let's maximize let's fill every bus, even if it takes us, closer to, we're working at a preferred maximum ride time of 45 minutes or less. But let's fill every bus. And if that gets us over on average over 45 minutes, yeah, you could find additional efficiencies there. Your limiting factors are always how many students you're going to put on the bus and how long you're willing to let that first student who gets on the bus ride.
Right. And I think it would be a goal of every board member to minimize ride times as much as possible. Dr. Arlotto, you had something to add?
I did, thank you. Just in terms of, because you were appropriately asking the question regarding the 32 buses needed, and being able to separate for the board and the public that one is not needed for the other, that Dr. Prieto and her team are able to make this work and not need the 32 buses, though that's working towards more of an ideal. But as of right now, based on the data that was shared tonight, there is still, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Prieto, you're still looking to whittle down 43 buses. You're currently at 561 in your current routing, and you and your team want to get to, the goal is 518, which is a cost neutral number, basically, if I heard your presentation correctly, which means you're at 43 buses shy of making that happen. And over the next 4 weeks, the plan is, in working with our team, to whittle that down with a target number of 518. Is that accurate?
Correct. And, if along the way we're able to try to address some of the buses that are currently within the existing day-to-day runs that you're doing now, oversubscribed, meaning they have more than the 2 per seat, we're trying to address some of that as we go. And that would eat into that 28 bus figure for the high schools, because it's primarily at the high schools where we're seeing that.
Okay. Just to follow. Thank you. And just to follow up on that real quick, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. But moving on, my other questions are, my other question is about activity buses, but can you remind me what time you have for a middle school end time?
3:55.
3:55. Okay, so currently we have high schools, all high schools are letting out earlier than all other schools. And so you were saying that there's not a lot to be gained for the high schools in terms of activity buses, but if we have many of our elementary schools starting before our high schools, isn't that fewer afternoon runs after high school runs? Are there not gains to be found there? And in addition, many of our high schools share a campus with a middle school, and could we get creative there with activity buses? In other words, I don't know, for high school students to leave later, if you could speak to that.
I think that so what we're changing, the bigger piece that we're changing that affects the activity runs is high school is going to end before the middle school, which is what you currently have. However, all your middle schools are going to end at the same time, and the difference is smaller than what you currently have. And so your middle school and the big limiting factors in doing this, right? We've got this stack for high school runs that have to be done, and then usually a slightly smaller stack of runs that have to be done for middle schools. And by the time you're going to have to do your middle school runs before you can even think about freeing those buses up to do activity runs for the high school. What I'm not clear on is, do you need an activity run 2 hours after high school lets out? In which case, maybe you have more free play there. If it's an hour and a half after school, high school lets out, that might be more difficult because your middle schools are getting out at 3:55. Some of those runs are 45 minutes long, and then they've got to cycle back around to get to the high school. an hour and a half might not be enough time to repurpose that. All that said, looking at the impact on activity runs was explicitly not one of the things that we looked at. And so I'm reading into the data without having done any, true, moving stuff around and looking at what happens activity run wise.
But you're not, just to make sure I understand correctly, you're not seeing this as a negative impact to current whatever we're doing with activity buses. You're just saying you're not seeing a big gain for our high schools at this point.
Right. Ms. Omnisworth's question is whether or not it freed up a lot more activity runs. And I don't think that a lot more buses for activity runs. I don't think I see that. And depending on when you need those activity runs for the high school, I think, you're looking at probably about the same amount of resources you have now. Now, the middle schools, I think you're going to have lots of potential additional activity bus resources because they're the last tier.
Are there any more questions for Dr. Prieto? Ms. Schallheim?
Yes, thank you. I just had one more question, and that is, do you see any impact of the new legislation for non-bus transportation, and how would that impact what we're trying to do in terms of efficiencies, or in terms of freeing up buses for other things like activity buses?
Please inform me which non-bus transportation legislation is being discussed.
I thought it passed. Did it not pass? Yeah.
Okay.
So
So Michelle, I'm referring to the legislation passed, but the regulations have not been written, so we can't access that or put it into play. But what she's referring to, Dr. Prieto, is our state legislation has changed what your first recommendation from your original report was to look at changing legislation in what kinds of vehicles could be used in the state of Maryland. And so a change to that has been made by the legislature in the last session and went into law last spring, early summer. But the regulations have to be written in conjunction between the Maryland State Board of Education and the Maryland Transportation Authority, and they've not done that yet, so it's not actually accessible to the school districts. But we're waiting on those regulations.
I can respond to that. A, I think it's a wonderful thing that Maryland is doing. And B, once it is possible for you to put that into play, two things I think the board ought to look at. One, a recommendation that we made in the original report of shifting homeless transportation to something that is more easily adaptable to the homeless student situation. And that would be smaller vehicles providing more quickly responsive transportation. Off the top of my head, I think it was 4 buses assigned to homeless transportation within the district right now. That would free up those buses to do other things for which buses are better adapted to do. I think it also opens the possibility, and we did not touch on this in the report, but it's something my team and I have talked about, is as you're looking at how you provide transportation services to students who want to go to magnet schools, particularly the 3Zs and 4Zs who want to go from all the way to the Northeast to all the way to the Southwest. We shouldn't necessarily look at just doing bus service. You may find a very cost-effective solution once those regulations are promulgated, and you can do other things. And so I think that offers a lot of possibilities. It's not something that will impact your traditional, regular education busing, however.
Okay, thank you so much.
And if I may, Ms. Schallheim, I'd just like to add one more group that I believe really should be explored as well, and that's our non-public school. We also transport youngsters to fairly remote and far distance non-public schools, but they, in many cases, are in small numbers. And so being able to utilize a smaller vehicle for a lengthy but lightly populated run would certainly be a benefit to the school district as well. So I just want to keep that on the radar of everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Is there more on this end? You will, yep. You are on mute. Oh, oh. Can you turn your dais mic off? I don't know if that. All right. No, you're not coming through. Hold on. Help is coming. Oh yeah, it could be that button. Miss Dent is going to be speaking through.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
there we
I
go.
think that I can hear me now.
Yep.
Okay, good. Dr. Prieto, thank you very much for not only being so detailed in your update. No, I'm good. Not just please. Thank you so much. I got a lot of help. This is great. This is the most welcoming board I've ever been on, so I appreciate you all. But my question is really not about is really more managing my expectations, because I've heard a lot of conversation about training. I've heard and throughout the report, it talked a lot about training. It talked a lot about implementing standard operating procedures into a lot of the processes in order for us to be able to implement a lot of the recommendations. Realistically, how realistic, I guess I should ask first before I make my ask my second question, that we would actually implement this this school year? How realistic is that?
Changes in school start times are fundamentally a board decision. If you're asking if I would recommend that you jump in January, I would say no. I think that, you know, to harken back to something, you know, one of the speakers earlier tonight said, you know, if you only have a minute left to plan, you know, you'll get it done, but, you know, your execution may not survive first contact. You know, I think that there's a lot of, you know, potential truth in that. My worry, if you do it in January, is not necessarily whether the transportation department will be ready. It is whether or not all the contractors will be on board, not just contractually, but whether or not they will have had time to fully communicate to their bus driver of 20 years, no, you're not doing what you've done for the last 20 years. I need you to do something else starting January. And also, you know, all the pieces outside the transportation department that take time. You know, I work with a lot of school districts. I haven't worked intimately with every part of your school district. And even though I've given you the list from all the years of working with other districts, I would bet a quarter at least that I've missed something that's totally particular to your school district, that once you start thinking deeply about it, okay, we're going to do this if you decide to do it, you know, that, oh my gosh, what about X? And I, you know, recognize I from the transportation side of the house, if you decide to do it, I strongly recommend that you do your dry runs 2 weeks prior to implementation so we have time to make adjustments. Now, what does that mean? That means that maybe there are 2 or 3 runs that when we go out there and do them in actual field conditions, the run time is not 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes because there's a particular light and traffic that, you know, going into a plant or something that isn't accounted for. And so we have to adjust that run. Now, that's a fairly simple matter to do within the transportation department, but what does that mean for the parents? Parents have been told, okay, your bus stop is here and it's going to be at 8:10. We've adjusted the run. Now we got to go back out and communicate to parents. Oh, no, it needs to be 7:50. And we're doing all of that just a week or two before the actual implementation. I think in that kind of a situation, there's a really high chance that, balls will get dropped, and it'll be more confusing than it has to be. That said, I applaud the district for having flipped school start times with COVID and flipping back. I mean, you've demonstrated flexibility that I don't see in a lot of school districts. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is the board's decision.
Thank you. And my follow-on question to that is that I saw a little bit about special education, about the process that we use right now. It's manually, and in the new systems and recommendations to the new systems. How likely will that implementation occur in the first run, or is that being considered altogether, that all of this will happen simultaneously, and then this will, not that it will be smooth sailing, but that communication will get out to those parents as well in the same manner that it is with everyone else. I would love for it to be on an equal band, but in reality, I would just want to make sure that I can manage my expectations.
So in order to, we're looking specifically at regular education runs. The district has its own internal operations to meet most of your special education requirements for transportation. And what would happen with those students if they attend a school that also has regular education programming, and we shift that school start time from 7:30 to 8:30, the special education students would need to shift as well. And, it won't work to have them on a different schedule, and that's would probably lead you down a path you don't want to go anyway. What happens to students that are in out of district placements? In many cases, you don't have any control over when those schools start and end anyway. And so much of their life remains unchanged. They're being transported on special education transport to an out of district school. They will see nothing from this. But the special education students who are educated within buildings that also provide regular education, their schedules will have to change in order to provide them with the same educational opportunities. I don't think we've had any discussions about regular special education classroom in a high school having a different schedule. That would just be operationally too complex for you on the ground. So they would shift as well.
And if I can just add one other point to that, Ms. Dent, is that we do have nine schools, I'll call them special schools, as well as two vocational schools that are not within the scope of what Prismatic is working with. Once we understand the structure of the bell times and the routing for the regular ed population, which is within the scope of the Prismatic work, we're going to have to identify where we can essentially place those 9 special schools and those 2 vocational schools such that they also work. But there will be adjustments to those. That is not a part of Dr. Prieto's work. It will be work that can be done after we receive the output of her initial phase of work.
All right, thank you all very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Got one more?
Thank you, President Ellis. Just really quick, this is more for staff than it is for our consultant. It's sounding like when I was looking at that, and based on our previous conversation as it related to certain contracts and snow, I was looking at that a little closer. Am I reading this correct, that our start time adjustments would mean, or could mean, so for example, if we're at a 2-hour delay because at 7 a.m., and that 7:15 to 7:30 start times that we currently have are more like 9:30, then in reality, we could end up with a 1-hour delay and actually be increasing the overall time of education in some of those circumstances. Am I reading that correctly, that there's a potential additional benefit of the start time adjustments as it relates to the mornings? Or am I overreading it?
So let me try to tackle that one, Ms. Cormenda. Essentially, 1 hour delays operationally really don't work very well. So I don't know if we would bifurcate that and begin having 1 hour delays versus 2 hour delays. But two clear benefits of a later first run of schools is, for example, we're making decisions at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, right? So if the whole school system slides 30 minutes, well, we get to stare at the radars for 30 more minutes and talk to our colleagues for 30 more minutes. No, seriously, which could improve the accuracy of the decision. That's the first piece. And the second piece is, and again, every storm has its own unique character, but if a storm stops at 3 a.m. and I currently only have from 3 a.m. till 7:18 or 7:30, but now I'll have until 8. Again, that gives our crews another 38 minutes, 48 minutes to continue to work the conditions, which could improve the on-scene arrival conditions for the school. And then finally, again, depending on the month of the year, there potentially could be some enhanced daylight, obviously, as well, which would help our walkers, et cetera. So I don't, again, TBD in terms of how it would impact the gain on the instructional day, but I think it would aid in the system's decision-making and in our preparedness abilities. I don't know if Dr. Arlotto would have anything else in addition to that.
No, thank you, Alex. I think you made all the appropriate points, particularly as it relates to now daylight. That's one of the things that I think storms look better in the daylight than they do in the dark. And so that is helpful. That's one of the things that we talk about in getting us to the daylight as a possible 2-hour early dismissal. Again, as Alex said, a 1 hour operationally, I don't know what that gains us. It's something we certainly could have on the books in terms of schedules that are prepared in case we wanted to go that way. But 2 hours is something that has given us time to make sure that our lots and sidewalks are cleared as needed and that everybody can make the appropriate adjustments. But certainly looking at an hour is a possibility. It all depends on the storm at a given time period.
And this is a follow-up then, likewise, if we're doing when we get into the scenario of the service that we were talking about where the parents would sign up for transportation as opposed to each and every, we would need accommodations, possibly additional ones for that. And also for the amount of students we average coming into the school system throughout the school year. Is that correct? Are those factors?
If we go to, if the board chooses to go to an opt-in, then we would not have wiggle room. It would be, and right now there's wiggle room for parents to make decisions, but if you go to an opt-in and you look to gain the efficiencies that Dr. Prieto mentioned as a distinct possibility, Ms. Corcadell, you wouldn't have any wiggle room for then when the parent makes a decision because it's a 1 hour delay or 2 hour delay. Well, I'm going to go to work and you just go ahead and get on the bus. If they had not committed to the bus, then they would not be allowed on the bus because there wouldn't be appropriate space. We would have made those adjustments to the numbers on those buses and routes accordingly.
And the students that transfer in throughout the school year, how would that be? Like, how many do we even have? I mean, I've heard as upshot of a couple hundred in a year, and I know it varies from year to year. That's what we're averaging. I know in some of our other, that's been a pretty steady number. And then the amount on the military has varied from year to year. How many new kids do we end up with between our September 30 count and the end of the year?
I don't have a number in front of me, but what has worked is that as we're gaining students, we also lose students. So over time, it has balanced out, and we'll be able to meet the needs of the students that are coming in, because we always have students leaving the system at the same time.
But in the opt-in, then we're in that precision seating, and the place where we're going to be gaining the seat may not necessarily be where the new family is. Is that so? That would be something we would have to kind of build in some way. In other words, like not necessarily 100% we're at our max, but have some of those flex. Maybe maybe the small buses is also the answer on that too.
Correct. It becomes a limiting factor in some instances, and that is one.
Okay, it's good to know as we continue our discussion. No more questions. Thank you, President Ellis.
Okay, I see no more questions. First of all, Dr. Prieto, thank you for your work and your presentation. I think there's going to be, perhaps some board discussion here, a board action. I don't know if it would be helpful for you to stick around in case there's questions around the board action, or but I just wanted to thank you. And I don't know, do you have a few more minutes? I don't think it'll be.
Yeah, thank you. And I have all the time in the world since I had nothing to catch tonight.
All right. So I see no lights right now. I do have a motion. But yeah, I guess if we've asked all of our questions. So just real briefly, sorry, I'm pulling up some information real quick. Let me get that whittled down. There we go. So we this is a discussion that's been going on for years in the school system. There's been a great deal of interest in addressing healthy start times for students based on the mountains of research that shows the benefits of this. So last January, I believe it was, there was a motion to for the board to receive a plan based on implementing healthy start times around certain parameters. In March, Dr. Arlotto and his team contracted with Prismatic to help work through the transportation aspect of this. And then in June 2nd, I believe, Prismatic presented their initial findings, which was that we could accomplish those parameters that the board was seeking at little to no cost. And at that time, the following motion was passed. In order to align students' school day schedules with medical and psychological organizations' recommendations based on decades of peer-reviewed research, Ms. Ellis moved that AACPS establishes start and dismissal times based on this board's parameters stated at the January 2021 meeting, the date of implementation to be decided following an update by Prismatic Services at the August 18th board meeting during phase 2, and that the board commits itself to gather input, community input, and provide continued transparency to the public through this process. And the board voted 7-1 to approve that motion. So that was an action that the board took to establish that we are going to implement healthier start times. And the question that has been left unanswered is when. Again, Dr. Prieto presented to us on the transportation aspect of to to be frank, a little frustrated that we couldn't, after that June meeting, be moving all the other pieces in place, because initially the board did set January as the goal for this implementation. That being said, I have to face reality, and I say me, anyone who knows me knows that this has been a topic of an issue that I am passionate about for our students. So, and I'm sorry, I did not construct in writing, but I think it's going to be very simple. If Ms. Howe, could you take this down? It'll be very simple, I think. Based on the board's action at its June 2nd, 2021 meeting to implement healthier school start times, I move that the implementation of the new start times be at the beginning of the 22-23 school year. I don't want to get it wrong.
Second.
All right, it's a motion and a second. I don't see any lights, but I do want to speak to it briefly. Oh, now I see lights. Okay, Miss Dent. Don't hear you. Yeah. Here we go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I agree with the motion as in the contextually. I would just want to know, is there a possibility for us, and this may not necessarily be for anyone other than Dr. Lotto's team, the possibility of doing the test run prior to the end of the school year, this fiscal year. I'm sorry, this school's calendar year. And I say that in the manner that we set a goal, realistic or not, for January of 2022. And I think that if we could just do some testing prior to the end of school year, notwithstanding that there wouldn't be need to do any more testing, but maybe this will eliminate a lot of the frustration that we know that is going to occur with a little bit of planning into the new fiscal year. So I would just only ask, is that an opportunity to do that?
Thank you, Ms. Dent, for the question. I don't know that there's an opportunity to do that. It's certainly something we can explore. We are very, very familiar with doing dry runs. It's something that school systems do year in and year out. Of course, you can only do it when you have drivers available and you don't have students on the buses, right? So it has to be done at a time when students are not in school. That's the reason it's typically done during the end of the summer months, because you meet those two qualifications. You don't have students on the buses when you're doing all of your dry runs, your empty runs, and you've got the bus drivers available. So for us to do something before the end of this school year, we would most likely have to negotiate something with each of the contractors where they would have to and I'm going to make this up for conversation's sake, Ms. Dent, during spring break when students are not in school, we utilize a day to run for them all to get the runs in. The difficulty with that, and I'll just add another piece of this because I'm thinking out loud, is that you don't have the drivers that you have right now may not be the same drivers that'll run those routes next school year. And that's not a showstopper, but there's a couple of variables here that we would have to work out. Again, we're very familiar with doing these kinds of runs, but it's typically done just as the drivers are coming back on board and under contract at the end of the summer before the children start to board the buses. We can certainly explore your suggestion of doing something before the end of the school year.
Ms. Frank.
I just wanted to reiterate that this decision has already been made, that motion has been previously resolved. So moving forward with this motion, the only question is, do we implement now or do we implement in the fall? I would just suggest that, as the expert has stated tonight, that she would recommend a fall start time. I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, President Ellis. I too will be supporting this. I think that based on the doing well and the parameters that our consultant outlined, along with our staff, and given our current crisis, that although some would definitely benefit at a midterm this year, it's important that we get this right. And so I want to thank everybody again, because this is hard, and it's even harder because it seems like the goalposts may be moving for folks, but it's very important we get it right and that we are conscientious of each and every student and family's condition. And I applaud my colleagues for coming together for this.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to just echo some of the other comments and to say I fully appreciate that there are a lot of families out there. I've seen the heartfelt emails from families who are quite desperate to have this change come as soon as possible. Speaking as the mother of a member of the class of 2020 at Annapolis High, I watched what my child went through. And I saw her come here in the fall of 2019 to testify for start time changes. And it shocked me that she did, because that's she's generally not a fan of putting herself into those public kinds of settings. And she was a senior, and I asked her why she did it, and knowing that it would make no change for her. And she said, because I don't want the kids who come behind me to go through what I went through. And so I do understand that it's hard to see this move a little further away, but it is my sincere hope that we don't just make these changes, we make them as well as possible. And I would also say that it is my practice, as it has been in a number of important decisions that we've made, to follow the advice of experts. And in this case, we've heard from an expert who's been looking at this very closely. And so I think it is the wisest course. And I thank my colleagues for coming together on this. Thank you.
Ms. Schalheim.
I want to echo everyone else's comments on this. Obviously, this is something that's been near and dear to my heart since I was a candidate as a parent of an elementary school child whose school starts enormously late. It was 9:40, now it's 9:35. I want to speak to those elementary school parents out there that are also desperate for this change, to apologize that that won't be happening seemingly this school year, but that relief is in sight. This will benefit working families. This will benefit your children's schedule. This will benefit kids up and down our school system from pre-K to 12. And I'm delighted we're finally at this point, a little emotional actually, and absolutely be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Ms. Omasori.
So, okay. In the same spirit as Dr. Tobin's daughter, I am thinking, oh gosh, did I really miss it by 1 year? Also, as someone who has to get to school at 7:30, well, class at 7:30 tomorrow, I'm also thinking we were so close. Yeah, but I share the same sentiment, and I was originally thinking, it seems like we all feel the same way. Why do they keep talking? I have to go to school tomorrow. But I do think this is really important, and I think that I'm going to be very excited to tell my constituents, which I guess in this case is the students who will mostly reap the benefits of this, that they will no longer have to wake up before the sun when it comes to going to school. And so I would just like to thank Prismatic for all the work that they've done, and for the board being able to come to these conclusions before I was even able to sit upon this dais. And although I will be in college taking God knows what types of classes and waking up at whatever hours, I'm happy to say that the students behind me, my favorite underclassmen and middle schoolers and elementary schoolers, will get to benefit what I could not do, which is go to school after 7:30. So I'm really happy to say that I think I know how this motion will go. Thank you.
Thank you. And first to Ms. Omasori, the silver lining here is at least my 2 college students have never had to get up nearly as early for any of their college classes. So choose your classes wisely. Yeah, right. Look, I do have to very quickly address those families and those students who are struggling. And I've now had 4 students who have struggled with getting up before the sun. It's just, they're fighting their body every day. And I still have 2 who are dealing with that. One who is a senior, so she too will not be able to. So I real quickly wanted to address, I fully recognize, and it actually pains me to have made this motion to implement in the fall rather than January. It pains me for my own household, and it pains me for all of the families we've been hearing from. I've been getting lots of emails. Please implement in January. Please implement in January. And the value in that is when it gets really hard. The months of January through March are so difficult for a lot of our students. And I just want to, I just implore you to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. These days are coming to an end of waking our students up before the sun. And I appreciate all of my colleagues coming together on this and us actually getting it done. Dr. Arlotto, I was very heartened to hear of the fact that an implementation team has begun to be assembled, and that you will be identifying a project manager, and that we are ready to lead our community through this. And we are here for you, and we want to hear from you, and we want to help you address any of your concerns. We do need to get this right, and that's the purpose of my motion tonight. Ms. Howell.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Okay. Based on the board's action at its June 2nd, 2021 meeting to implement healthier start times, Ms. Ellis moved that the implementation of the new start times be at the beginning of the 2022-2023 school year. Ms. Schallheim seconded. Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Omasori?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Do I hear another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Consensus? Thank you all.